Let's wait for a while. Okay.
Okay. Namaste. Good evening, everyone. Namaskar, sir.
Namaste, sir.
आज हामी परराष्ट्र सेवाको शाखारित पदको परराष्ट्र सेवा एक च्याप्टर 2 फरेन पोलिसी एन्ड इन्टरनेसनल रिलेसन्स यो पेपरको आज हामी क्वेसन एन्सर डिस्कसन सेसनमा छौँ र युट्युब र फेसबुकमा हामी लाइभ गरेका छौँ र त्यहाँ विद्यार्थीहरूलाई पनि केही सहयोग गर्नको लागि र प्रश्न सबैले आजको फेसबुक पेजबाट पक्कै पनि पाउनु भएको छ र म यहाँ स्लाइडली यहाँ पनि देखाउँछु बिचमा र सबै साथीहरूलाई अब यसमा कन्सन्ट्रेट गर्न एकचोटि जानकारी गराए र अबको फिडब्याक क्लासको लागि आदरणीय नरेश सरलाई अनुरोध गर्छु प्लिज अगाडि बढाउँ हजुर
So, cordial thanks to Mr. Madhav Pandey sir for creating this wonderful opportunity to connect with all these wonderful peoples. So, I would like to welcome all of you who have joined the Facebook, YouTube live as well as live from Zoom portal under the portal of CEDEP Nepal, which has created this wonderful opportunity to facilitate the learning as well as accelerate the writing efficiency power of all those candidates, those who are aspired in foreign service there. And cordial thanks once again to CEDEP Nepal and especially to Madhav Pandey sir for mediating all these procedures. And I would like to welcome all of you people who have joined me live for the discussion for our feedback session of extra paper 2, that is to say for international relations and diplomacy. I'm sure all of you have gone through the question. Whenever the questions are asked in your examination, they are strategic and deal with your analytical power. Though the answer might refer the same that you have studied on your content base, but the nature of questions sometimes can mislead you. That's why I would like to make you aware that you have to be very much careful enough to divide the spirit of the question to present your answer in a logical, chronological order there. So without making much interpretation and creating delay, because you were notified for the feedback right from 5 p.m. but due to some technical and behavioral reasons, we were not able to conduct right from 5. Sorry for that delay. And now we will begin the feedback session. I will start the feedback right from the question number 1. You see that you can see on your question paper under 4 different sections. You will be asked 10 questions. Remember, the answer sheets that you have to present will be different in each section. Regarding that, later on, whenever those who have been preparing this service as well as examination for the last year, they have already been familiar in the physical examination mock test by the CEDEP Nepal. And those who are preparing for the next year, you will certainly have such type of experience in the physical examinations that will be facilitated by the CEDEP Nepal later on there. So now here in the first section, there are 2 questions ranging 10 marks. That is to say 10 plus 10, 20. You can see on your screen the first question. You see that first of all, you got to break down the elements of question. The first question is that every country has to take several factors into consideration while formulating its foreign policy. See that every country has to take several factors into consideration while formulating its foreign policy. These factors, known as the determinants of foreign policy, may differ from state to state. Then the question arises. It's a very simple question. Khasma, your question bhaneko, what is foreign policy and what are the determining factors of Nepal's foreign policy? You see that यही क्वेसन हो तर तपाईलाई मिसलिड गर्नलाई स्ट्र्याटेजिकली क्वेसनलाई यसरी बेन्ट गर्न सकिन्छ सो यु गट टु बी भेरी मच केयरफुल नाउ लेट्स एनालाइज द एलिमेन्ट्स अफ द क्वेसन फर्स्ट यु सी क्वेसन नम्बर 1 एलिमेन्ट्स ब्रेक डाउन गर्ने पहिला क्वेसनलाई एलिमेन्ट्स what are the elements you got to learn two strategies before you answer the question first break down the question into important elements second is there second you got to and the second one is there you got to give the right pattern for the question you see what are the elements first is what is foreign policy in this question what is foreign policy that you got to write in 2 bullets I'm sure you understand the bullets bullets do not carry more than 3 lines sometimes it can have only single sentence but it will be beautified to be written in nearly 2 or 3 lines for a bullet you see there 2 bullets what is foreign policy you got to give a rational answer which can demarcate the areas of determinants or the foreign policy significance. So, what is foreign policy? 2 bullets. Then after, you see that. Significance in a bullet. Then you got to give a bullet significance of foreign policy. You see that? Then after, here goes hook up sentence. Do you understand hookup sentence? This is directive, connecting directive sentence. This is directive sentence. Directive. That means what are you going to write? You're going to present that factor after this. That is a hookup sentence. Then after relating the significance and giving the direction for what? Determinants. That is the universal determinants. You see that universal determinants of foreign policy. You can give them in points because points will highlight your points with clarity. Points. And then after, again, hookup sentence is a 10 marks question and nearly you have to meet 2 pages at least, otherwise 2.5 page answer for each 10 marks question. Hook up sentence. You see that hookup sentence. Again, directly, then after, determinants of Nepal's foreign policy. You see that? Nepal's foreign policy. And then you're gonna write what? Conclusion. Conclusion will not be more than 2 to 3 lines. That means just 2 sentences. You got to demarcate conclusion within 2 or 3 lines. That means just 2 sentences. Or sometimes a single sentence having complex or compound pattern adjoined by a conjunction. This is the pattern for writing this particular question. Now let me respond this question with the factual answer. What are you going to write there? And remember one thing, how you got to respond the definitive beginning that I'm going to show. All the 10 questions, complete answer is not possible to be written here, but I will give you the main clue ideas and all the possible facts to relate your answer there. Let me show you how you got to begin this question. This is a content-based question, you have to understand. But few analytical interpretations are required to respond your question, as your question has asked what? Every nation has to encompass with certain determinants. Why? What is the baseline for proving that particular statement? Few analysis has to be presented, otherwise this is a pure content based question. Just for example, you got to give definitive beginning. How you got to write definitive beginning? You see there, just 2 definitions. Foreign policy. Foreign policy is a plan of action. Is a plan of action. You see that? Action adopted. You cannot make a casual statement. Formal sentences only, okay? Adopted by one nation or a state. Nation or a state, no problem. Though there is significant, substantial difference between nation and state. In the maintenance of diplomatic language, you don't have to make much worriedness to define what is a state and what is a nation there. In regard to its diplomatic dealings, in regards to its diplomatic dealings. Diplomatic dealings. Look at that. Pure form change, right? Diplomatic dealings with other countries. With other countries. It deals with the, you see there, it deals with the execution of, it deals with the execution of domestic policy from the global community. From the global community to obtain or fulfill, to obtain vested interest. You see that? This is the first bullet. First bullet, foreign policy is a plan of action adopted by one nation in regards to its diplomatic dealings with other countries. That is to say, it deals with the execution of domestic policy from the global community. Domestic policy is executed from where? From the global community. For what? To obtain vested interest. This is the first bullet. I cannot write complete such type of definitive beginnings and complete answer for each and every question. As it is the first question, I need to lead you towards the right direction. That's why I'm giving the right information there. You can, second bullet also has to define the foreign policy only, but in different language. You see there? Second bullet. Foreign policy is the extension of the domestic policy, extension of the domestic policy which signifies the substance of international or foreign relations there. Foreign relations. You see that it is the systematic statement deliberately. You see the systematic statement deliberately selected for national interest. You see that these are two perfect, not necessarily what I have written you got to write. You can define foreign policy in several other words as well. You see that foreign policy is an extension of domestic or internal policy. So one must recognize the first that no nation or state can preserve its independence, sovereignty, similarly territorial integrity without making a permanent policy to be executed for protection of its interests through the global community. That is to say, foreign policy of the state guides or is a path through which a nation practices diplomatic procedures in the global community. Foreign policy provides a significant guideline for a recognized state to maintain bilateral as well as multilateral relations, and it can help a recognized state to practice diplomatic immunities and privileges in the global community. That is to say, it is a, yes, sure, you can. So it is the complex interplay of geography, history, tradition, present requirements, perception of the national interest by the ruling elite or by the government or recognized government by the state. So that is to say, what else you got to understand? Foreign policy is a complex phenomenon which deals with each and every issues that are the subject of national concern and national interest there. So foreign policy of a state is a demarcated policy, is a fixed guideline, or is established as a systematic way through which a nation maintains its global relations there. So that you clearly can say it includes a bundle of principles and practices that regulate a state's behavior. That's why you can also say that foreign policy is the external behavior of the nation as well. यति लेखिसकेपछि अब एउटा चाहियो हुकअप सेन्टेन्स. What is that hookup sentence? You have to signify why foreign policy is required there. You see that? Now, after this, you require a little significance. Then after only, you can move on to what? Determinants. You see the foreign policy of the recognized state. Foreign policy of the recognized state. Foreign policy of the recognized state displays the external behavior to maintain and execute foreign affairs. Look at that. So foreign policy of the recognized state displays the external behavior to maintain and execute foreign affairs, through which the state not only expands, look at that, not only expands its global relation. Formal sentence or its global relation, look at that, but also secures its sovereignty. You see that? Similarly, its sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and mutual coexistence in the global community. Sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. Look at that. So, why you have given a little lengthy introduction here? Because the question has asked you to interpret the determinants within the perspective of foreign policy. Body focus कहाँ गरेको छ क्वेशनले foreign policy of the state. That's why your interpretation must rely on the interpretation of foreign policy to demarcate the guidelines or determinants of the foreign policy of the individual recognized state in the global community, specifically to practice international relations and enjoy the diplomatic immunities and privileges secured by the Vienna Convention 1961 and 63 on bilateral relations. You look at that, there are diplomatic relations there. So यहाँसम्म तपाईको introductory part सक्यो. And our determinants, I'm not going to write the determinants there. I'm going to explain. I'm sure that is a pure content question.
टेरिटोरियल इंटिग्रिटी पछि एउटा वर्ड भन्नुहुन्थ्यो नि हजुरले, अझै एउटा यो भन्दा चारवटा कुरा भन्नुहुन्थ्यो कि यो त्यहाँ अहिले हजुरले लेखाइरहनु भएको छ नि, त्यसमध्ये सिग्निफिकेन्समा चारवटा अझै एउटा राम्रो पोइन्ट भन्नुहुन्थ्यो कि टेरिटोरियल इंटिग्रिटी पछि
के भने just wait, when it comes in my mind I'll read it, don't worry.
Mutual coexistence,
territorial integrity and protection of national interest, you can read. So you see that is to say now so mutual coexistence. Okay, thank you. So that is to say, now what are the determinants of foreign policy? How a nation or recognized state maintains or determines its foreign policy. Remember that the geopolitical situation of the country is a prime factor which decides a foreign policy of the state. Similarly, socio-political system of that nation is another determinant. Similarly, military power, or you can also say that armament status of the nation is also another factor that determines the foreign policy of the state. Because the foreign policy of the United States of America does not match with the foreign policy of Nepal. Because these two nations are different in terms of geography, political system, democratic procedure, governance system, similarly population. They also differ in terms of culture, religion, economy, trade, and then after economy, internal factors, their history. That is to say, all these factors are the significant factors to determine the foreign policy of the state. त्यसलाई पहिला खुलाइदिने मैले अघि नै प्याटर्न दिइसकेको छु यो क्वेसनको because without
Sir,
giving the universal determinants,
sir,
without
recognized
giving
state पछि के हो सर? फर्स्ट
के
लाइनमा
भन्दा पछि
फर्स्ट लाइनमा रिकग्नाइज स्टेट अनि त्यसपछि तल के सर?
displays. It's a displays. Okay.
अनि तल्लो
So that is to
तल्लो
say, what else you
लाइनको
got to understand? एकछिन तपाईहरुले मेरो फ्लो डिस्टर्ब गर्नु भएको छ है. यो क्लास र फिडब्याक अलि डिफरेन्ट हुन्छ है. You have to understand. If you disturb my flow, यो आन्सरको प्याटर्न बिग्रिन्छ. त्यही रङली बुझ्नु भयो नि भोलि जाँचमा लेख्दा फरक पर्छ है. तपाईहरु चाहिँ जति बोलिरहनु भएको छ, मेरो क्लासको अहिले रेगुलर क्लासको स्टुडेन्ट बोलिरहनु भएको छ. I can recognize your voice. तपाईको कन्फ्युजन म भोलि क्लासमै क्लियर गर्दिन्छु. त्यो इन्डिभिजुअल वर्ड रिलेटेड कुरा. अहिले क्वेशनको प्याटर्न र रेशनल आन्सरमा म्याक्सिमम टाइम चाहिँ you have to internalize my statements. I request you people, okay? So that is to say, what are the universal determinants I was telling you about? History, culture, religion, economy, military power, similarly geopolitical situation, and few external determinants are also significant to decide a foreign policy. That UN Charter, similarly international law, besides that the regional charters, power holding countries and their mate. Besides that, the relationship with neighboring countries, they are also determining factors. And besides, ultimately, the attitude of the policymakers who rules the government is also the factor to determine the foreign policy of the state as well. That's why you have to understand that foreign policy is an extent or in some extent, it is the reflection of the fundamental instincts of those who make it. Jastले foreign policy बनाउँछ तिनीहरुको केही न केही intent चाहिँ foreign policy मा आउँछ. That's why that is also the policy making factor of determining foreign policy. Now come back to the point. What are the determining factors of Nepal's foreign policy? We often call it Nepal's foreign policy. Remember that being one of the landlocked, least developed or developing country in the global community, Nepal has been victimized of landlockedness. It is characterized with bottleneck economic situation. That's why Nepal has to practice significant foreign policy to execute and encompass its economic interests. Without secure foreign policy, neither Nepal can protect its sovereignty and independence, nor it can safeguard its territorial integrity, or it cannot fulfill its economic interests as well. That's why it has got significant contributing factors, those which determine the foreign policy of Nepal. Among them, first of all, you see that, as I mentioned, geopolitical situation of the nation is a prime factor to define the foreign policy of Nepal. Security situation and peace, you see that is also the same. Security in the sense of not internal but external security, because Nepal is a landlocked nation. Moreover, it has got an open border with the southern neighbor there. That's why security situation and peace is also another factor. Political stability of the nation or political situation of the state is also determining factor. Not only that, socio-economic status of the country is another factor. You can also say that. So the feeling of strengthened nationality is another factor. That is to say, unity in diversity in our country has maintained strengthened uniformity, strengthened nationality. That is also the reason why foreign policy of Nepal is the reflection of people's will. As we are the people of democratic nation, and the recent profound of democratization of foreign policy has included the will and aspiration of people even in the foreign policy. That's why, so feeling of strength in nationality is also one of the factors that determines Nepal's foreign policy. Socio-cultural factors, specifically Nepal maintains foreign policy in two different basis. That is to say, the relation between neighboring states and the relation across the ocean. So that is to say, the relationship between India and China is one of the determining factor of Nepal's foreign policy due to its geopolitical location. And non-alignment policy of Nepal, that is also another factor through which we determine the foreign policy, because Nepal's foreign policy is based on the principle of what? Panchashil. That means what? Mutual coexistence, non-interference, non-aggression, and then after it's a respect to each other's sovereignty as well as world peace or the peaceful coexistence. That is to say, world peace and disarmament is also one of the principles through which Nepal's foreign policy is determined. Besides that, several other factors are there, like principle of Panchashil, trade and commercial relations, UN Charter, similarly regional charters. Besides that, the principle of international law, political system and its frequency. These are the determining factors of Nepal's foreign policy. So, and to line conclusion, you can develop to respond these questions answer. Now let's proceed to the next question, all of you. So next question is there.
सर यस्तो टाइपकोमा कन्क्लुजन चाहिँ अलिकति थोरै कन्क्लुजन पनि भनिदिनु न सर यसको
कन्क्लुजन यसरी लेख्ने ल हेर्नुस्. See there.
Sir.
Okay. If you have to conclude this question, how you can conclude? You see there. You can write conclusion as well, or you can dilate the conclusion with the certain terminologies. Just for example, you can write thus, to sum up, to conclude. You can use the such type of remarks there. To sum up. You see there, foreign policy. Foreign policy is the substance. Is the substance of the foreign relations. Foreign relations through which a state approaches the global community, and maintains diplomatic relations. The foreign policy of the state. Foreign policy of the state is the reflection of geopolitical situation. You see that geopolitical is the reflection of geopolitical situation. You see that economic status and the external behavior in both conventional and modern perspectives. You see there, your conclusion should not only end your answer but also conclude the overall thesis statement and central idea of your answer. That is called a thesis there. Now everyone, I am proceeding to the second question there.
Sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. यो यसको बुलेट्स के पोइन्ट्सहरु छ नि सर, यसको डिटर्मिनेन्ट्स फ्याक्टरहरुको एक्सप्लेन गर्दा हुन्छ कि
No, not necessary, not required. There are more than 10-15 determinants. You cannot explain each and everything. You don't have to explain. They are the facts and display the factual information. That's not required to be explained.
सर यसमा
Okay.
सर यसमा चाहिँ युनिभर्सल डिटर्मिनेन्ट्सहरु चाहिँ नि भाषामा प्याराग्राफमा लेख्ने अनि नेप्लिज डिटर्मिनेन्ट्सहरु छ नि नेपालको फरेन पोलिसी
तर
डिटर्मिनेन्ट्स
पोइन्ट्समै लेख्दै पनि हुन्छ, अझ बढी क्ल्यारिटी हुन्छ, झन्
दुईटैलाई
राम्रो नि।
पोइन्टमा लेख्दिनु सर।
Oh, okay. Now, second number question. All of you, I'm sure you have that question. So look at there. Let me read out the question. Otherwise, Madhav sir will display that question on your screen once for a while. How do you access Nepal-India relations in the perspective of geopolitical linkage? यो क्वेसन म ओरली एक्सप्लेन गर्छु र प्याटर्न मात्रै दिन्छु किन यो त तपाईले परापूर्वकालदेखि सुनिआएका कुरा पनि हुन्। You see that. How do you access? Access means what? Evaluate. How do you evaluate Nepal-India relations in the perspective? But you say that you cannot go beyond the question, okay? तपाईलाई लिमिट गर्दिसक्यो त्यो क्वेशनले के how do you evaluate Nepal-India relations in the perspective of what? One, geopolitical linkage and another cultural proximity. यही दुईटा कुरामा डिफाइन गर्नु। Briefly explain the strategic diplomatic steps to be followed to settle the border issues to enhance bilateral proximity. यो क्वेशनले दुईटा content plus modern situation लाई demand गरेको छ। That's why you got to be very much careful enough to deal with this question. First, let me break down the question. You see that. First, number 2 question. Conceptual framework. Framework of Indo-Nepal relations. What you have to write, I'm going to tell you there. You see there. यहाँनेरि तपाईले अलिकति चाहिँ history and practice. यो दुईटा कुरालाई रिलेट गर्नै पर्छ, history, practice and policy. Conceptual framework Indo-Nepal relations. History, practice and policy. यो तीनटा कुरालाई रिलेट गरेर conceptual framework दिने. You say that. That is to say, what else you got to understand here? Here, conceptual framework means, just for example, you can begin like this. You see there, since it's aligiti theoretical type of question pani ho. Since time immemorial, my beginning matra dekhaidiन्छु. Immemorial. You Nepal, India, India, Nepal. के फरक पर्छ? Let me clarify that. If you are the citizen, then you got to present sending state first. We are the people of sending state. India is the receiving state in diplomatic perspective from our view. That is to say, Nepal, India, नै लेख्ने, हामीले India, Nepal नलेख्ने, है त? So, since time immemorial, Nepal, India, Nepal and India, you see there, have been enjoying era long close bilateral proximity tied up within the fundamentals of you see there mutual socio-cultural status, religious uniformity, and spiritual connectivity. You see there, it's no type of theoretical framework but begin garda huncha kina you have to give the framework of Nepal-India relations. Since time immemorial, Nepal and India have been enjoying era-long close bilateral proximity tied up within the fundamentals of mutual socio-cultural status, religious uniformity, and spiritual connectivity. You see that? Spiritual connectivity here defines the people-to-people contact and close breed and daughter relationship between Nepal and India, or Indo-Nepal relations there. So, conceptual framework of Indo-Nepal relations. Breakdown नगर्न के भन्छ गर्न जान्नु भएन भने त्यो क्वेशनको आन्सर हुन सक्छ तपाईले 5 पेज लेख्न सक्नु होला तर त्यो क्वेशनले मागेको आन्सर कहिले पनि आउँदैन. So breakdown is very much important here. How your conceptual framework first ma. Then after you going to give what? Second ma चाहिँ you see there. What is the second part? Okay, yes. Analytical paragraph. Analytical paragraph to define Nepal-India relations and what? Geopolitical base. Then question le maeko base. Like paragraph ma analytical way ma present garne. You have to present it on that. Analytical paragraph to define Nepal-India relation and geopolitical linkage and cultural proximity. You see that. And third part is there. You see there. Now, so present. You see there. Dialogueless situation, present dialogueless situation after Lipu Lake issue. यो कुराबाट यो चाहिँ एनालिसिस बिगिन गर्ने थर्ड बोर्डर इश्यूज को है बोर्डर इश्यूज को केसलाई प्रेजेन्ट डायलॉगलेस सिचुएसन आफ्टर लिपु लेक इश्यू यो एक केस म अहिले सरल फ्रेमवर्क दिन्छु तपाईलाई एक्सप्लेन गर्छु डोन्ट वरी दैट प्रेजेन्ट डायलॉगलेस सिचुएसन आफ्टर लिपु लेक इश्यू एन्ड देन आफ्टर नम्बर 4 you see here rational border issues कुन border issues rational छन् जसले चाहिँ इन्डिया नेपालको रिलेसन्समा disputable situation ल्याएको छ number 5 मा now you are presenting what diplomatic steps then you have to give what conclusive ending. So this is the framework of this question. You see that. Now let me explain in short there. So standing and enjoying in a similar geopolitical situation, two South Asian neighbors from the conventional point of view have been enjoying the open border as well as close bilateral ties since time immemorial. Within the perspective of people-to-people contact, cultural uniformity, religious similarity, as well as breed and data relations, Nepal and India have been enjoying cross-border relations by maintaining close neighborhood, assisting in each other's development, in each other's political system, as well as respecting each other's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. Nepal and India, they have got lots of joint ventures, collaborative development activities, as well as there is a cooperative development strategy in the different areas of technical development. That is to say, with the joint perspectives, both the nations enjoy not only the bilateral diplomatic affairs, but they stand firm to enhance close fraternity and strong brotherhood between two states. That is to say, but the disputable step as well as political encroachment within the territorial integrity of Nepal, with the undefined as well as unrefined boundary line between Nepal and India, with the close interpretation of open border system, Nepal has been victimized of border encroachment by the Indian policy executive. So that is to say, you got to understand that. You agadi ko part of the lekhna sakनुहुन्छ. यो जियोपोलिटिकल लिङ्केज र कल्चरल प्रोक्सिमिटीमा कुन कुन कुरा एक्सप्लेन गर्ने त्यो सर भनिदिन्छु। फर्स्ट अफ अल रिगार्डिङ जियोपोलिटिकल लिङ्केज 5 वटा कुरा गर्नुहोस्। फर्स्ट, ओपन बोर्डर। सेकेन्ड is a transit route. Third, free transportation. Then after you got to talk about what? Movement of people without any passport or document. त्यो पनि के हो त भन्दाखेरि जियोपोलिटिकल लिङ्केज हो। And privileged by the Peace and Friendship Treaty of 1950 to maintain the trade as well as land ownership in each other's country without any hindrance. त्यो कुरालाई पनि बोलाउनुस्। यो 5 वटा कुरा जियोपोलिटिकल लिङ्केज। कल्चरल प्रोक्सिमिटीमा 4 वटा कुरा गर्नुस्। फर्स्ट
सर त्यो भारतमा पनि हाम्रो नेपाली नागरिकहरूले चाहिँ जग्गा किन्न पाउँछन् भन्ने कुरा गर्नुभयो
हो। 1953 ले भनेको छ तर इन्डियन गभर्नमेन्टले दिदैन। Another fact is there, you listen to me. अर्को कुरा त्यो कन्टेन्ट यो 1950 ट्रिटी को चाहिँ क्वेशन छ आज त्यसैमा डिटेलमा एक्सप्लेन गर्छु। लिभ दैट पार्ट नाउ। त्यहाँ पढ्नै पर्ने कुरा छ। And then another fact is there in cultural proximity 4 वटा कुरा गर्नुस्। फर्स्ट, religious uniformity. Second, cultural proximity. Third, people to people contact. And fourth is there spiritual connectivity. Spiritual connectivity भित्र दुईटा कुरा पर्छन्। एउटा ह्युमन टु ह्युमन चाहिँ म्युचुअल चाहिँ रिलेसन पर्यो, अर्को चाहिँ रिलिजियस बेस पर्छ है त। यति कुरा गर्ने। अब नेक्स्ट पार्टमा अघिल्लो पार्ट गाह्रो छैन। सेकेन्ड पार्ट, briefly explain the strategic diplomatic steps to be followed to settle the border issues to enhance bilateral proximity. The increasing military and economic power of India is creating threat to the neighboring states that with the rising military power and the economic supremacy, India is dominating the surrounding or the neighboring states. And it has created severe threat to the sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and the peaceful coexistence and respect to each other's governance system in South Asia. That to relate as well as to analyze the state by India, we can take several examples of border encroachment by India with extent to Nepal. Just for example, the recent case of Lipulek and Limpuadara, inclusion of Nepalese territory into the political map of India, has proven the Indo-centric mentality to rise with the military power and impose upon hegemony by the Indo-centric administration in the neighboring states, especially the big brotherly attitude of India towards the neighboring state has created threat to state sovereignty and independence of the recognized state. So now you see, we can take the example of Lipulek, Kalapani, similarly Susta. Several national boundary lines have been encroached by India, and we have been victimized with the political sanctions as well as economic embargoes in the different interval of time, like border blockades there. That's why a systematic state level mechanism has to be developed to continue the diplomatic dialogue with the state mechanism to secure the state boundary and the sovereignty by the government of Nepal. But it is not an issue that can be handled by the individual states' mentality or individual states' efforts. Both the nation has to coordinate with the pacific means of settling these disputes and the border issues, because no situation can be brought into our favor by going through the violent or military procedures. That's why there is no another option without maintaining diplomatic relations with India. That is a fortune or misfortune, both are Nepalese people there. So what should be done? First of all, high-level state mechanism should be formed. Second, eminent persons group like state mechanism should be coordinated are given the full right to revise the treaties, agreements, as well as make a constrict borderline decisions. Third one is the regular establishment as well as inspection of borderline and establishment of scientific permanent pillars in the 10 Gaza. And 10 Gaza should be the land per zero activity, and it has to be inspected with the regular state mechanism. And another is the regular monitoring and security forces need to be adopted in the borderline by both the nations. A high-level diplomatic mechanism should be formed to review as well as inspect the borderline issues in the recurrent base. So by following these procedures, definitely we can settle the border disputes with India. Now let's enter into the next question, third question. Okay. You see that what is there? Oh, it's about UN. The UN is not fully successful in bettering the human lives in the world. What are your suggestions if it's to be made better so that if it's to be made? Okay, you can check on your screen, everyone. Master, alikiti scroll gardinus mati. Okay. Okay, you see that. The UN is not fully successful in bettering the human lives in the world. What are your suggestions? What are your suggestions is to be made to better so that it can be succeed in achieving such proposals and principles provided to in its charter. Let's break down the question. First of all, number 3. Is that 3 number? Yes. Introduction to UNO. First of all, introduction to UNO as and next year, first introduction to UNO. Second is there what? UNO as intergovernmental organization. Intergovernmental organization for world peace and stability, world peace and prosperity. Second question. Third one is there drawbacks, that is to say what? Failures. Failures of UNO. And the last point is there, you got to go with what? Before drawbacks, you can relate few successes. Successes and failures of UNO, and then after you got to give creative suggestions. Ekdam lined up question. Creative suggestions, then conclusion. 80 points highlight the question. UNO, first introduction to UNO. UNO as intergovernmental organization for world peace and prosperity. How? किन दुईटा कुरा गरेको छ, ह्युमन लाइफलाई बेटर गर्नु भनेको त एउटा पीस अर्को prosperity हो. सो सक्सेस एन्ड फेलियर्स अफ युएन, तपाईले युएनलाई कसरी बेटर गर्न सकिन्छ भन्नुको अर्थ त युएन त फेल भइराछ नि, त्यही कुरा देखाउनु. तर डिस्पाइट ह्याभिङ इज फेलियर्स केही हदसम्म त सक्सेस भएको छ. एक दुईटा पोइन्ट एनालाइटिकली एसिमुलेट गर्न सकिन्छ. So creative suggestions you have to give how UN can be reformed and can be made more and more impactful to better the human life. And last, you can give the conclusion. Now let me go through. Okay, everyone. Now, first of all, you see there, introduction. I'm not going to write anything. This is a content-based question. Each and everyone can write the answer. United Nations is an intergovernmental international organization established to maintain peace, prosperity, and secure brotherhood in the present world. After the backdrop of two world wars, the world saw the need of an umbrella organization which can coordinate and assist in building the peace, prosperity, development, and human development index in the modern world, together with the protection and promotion of environment for the future need. That's why UNO have been established there. The prime objective of UNO was to reconstruct the world by maintaining peace and prosperity with the socio-economic perspective. In that fact, UNO has remained somehow successful because it has successfully ended to fatal and most inhuman wars that the history or the world has ever seen. Similarly, it has been able to develop peaceful situation or it has been one of the contributing factor to maintain a strong fraternity which contributed the modern globalization. That's why it is significant. Through the specialized agencies and the major organs, UNO has remained successful to eradicate major communicable disease from the world, as well as somehow it has contributed to enhance the life of people in Europe and America, but not in Asia and Africa. So another fact is there, UN has remained successful to form the regionalism through which the nations are able to protect their sovereignty and maintain peaceful coexistence, respecting each other's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. In those sense, somehow UN has remained successful, but still UN has been failed. Why? You see here. अब यो फेलर केसहरु चाहिँ दुई चारवटा इम्पोर्टेन्ट बुलेट हो, डाइरेक्ट कन्टेन्टमा कतै भेटिदैन. सो कसरी फेलर्स लेख्दाखेरि कसरी लेख्ने हेर्नुस् त. Despite having so much successful, it has been failed as well. 10 क्लास लेख्ने सेन्टेन्स अलिकति लेख्नु पर्छ. You see there. United Nations faces rightful criticism. United Nations faces rightful criticism over its handling of controversies involving the situation of human life in the socio-economic perspectives. You begin the statements in such type of rational structure so that you can be valued with the better marks in your examination. Perspectives. Look at that. Whenever you are dealing with the diplomatic perspectives, when you are dealing with the diplomatic perspectives, you got to be very much creative enough that you're not using the loose sentences which creates burden for the reader. Make sure that. So you see that. What are the failures? Why UN has been failed? You see, first of all, veto power of Security Council. You see the Security Council has created awful debates and debacle the humanity. Why? It is the decision of Security Council where due to which a large or millions of innocent deaths have been experienced in the modern world because of fatal wars, use of atomic weapons, and nuclear proliferation issues there. That is to say, you've got to be very much careful enough that you're not going to use the fact for your interpretation. You got to give the rational ideas which can prove the question there. So, veto power of Security Council has created awful debates and debacle the humanity. Human better life, better why. Similarly, you see that peacekeeping operations hasn't been too successful. Hasn't been too successful. Similarly, another you see here. Still the major conflicts and belligerencies. Still the major conflicts and belligerencies have not been settled. You see that? Similarly, it hasn't checked. It hasn't checked the atomic and nuclear power. You see the nuclear power. There is still the race of atomic weapons in the world. Similarly, socioeconomic development. Socioeconomic development of the poor nations, of the least developed nations, of the least developed nations is pitiful. You see that? Still, UN was established to enhance the socio-economic development of those nations, but still not. So give such type of failure statement so that you can rationalize your answer. Now let me go through what should be done. यहाँ त क्वेशनले मेनली के सोधेको छ, के गर्न सकिन्छ? You see that?
सर यसमा प्रोस्पेरिटी भन्दै गर्दाखेरि अलिकति डिमेरिट्समा अथवा यसको फेलियरमा चाहिँ प्रोस्पेरिटी रिलेटेड सोसियो इकोनोमिक डेभलपमेन्ट एउटा लाइनले मात्रै पुग्छ सर?
थप्ने हो नि, मैले यति पोइन्ट भनेकै छैन नि, तपाईले थप्ने भने मैले त कहाँ सबै आन्सर दिएको छु त है? You see that? यो त यसरी तपाईले चाहिँ अहिले सबै आन्सर दियो भने त राति 12-1 बजेसम्म फिडब्याक हुन्छ, कतिजना त बेहोस हुन्छ है? ल, so you see there. Another is there now, democratization of UN. First of all, democratization of UNO and its rightful authority. You see there, it is very complex procedure to obtain the UN membership. Security Council has always been one of the supreme power in defining the issues in UNO. Similarly, Security Council. So you see there, dissolvement of veto power. Dissolvement of veto power. Veto power and dissolvement of veto power. Similarly, you see that UN staffing and management expenditure. Management expenditure should be reduced. Look at that. Similarly,
नम्बरको क्वेशन हो, लाइन गयो के त्यही भएर.
Third number. You see that? Make high impact. Make high impact management. Impact management. Resources. High impact management. Resources and accountability changes. Accountability changes. Next. Transform the management and humanitarian architecture. Look at that. Transform the management and humanitarian architecture. This is very much crucial as well. So continue badly needed peacekeeping reforms. This is also significant in enhancing the bettering the human life through UNO. Similarly, enhance the culture of accountability. Accountability. This is also very much significant there. Strengthen United Nations conflict prevention. Conflict prevention. So strengthen United Nations conflict prevention. Develop counter-terrorism mechanism. You see there. In developing such type of efforts, definitely we can see in bettering the human life through UNO. Now, next question number 4, all of you. Just get into question number 4. Mara sir, I request you to question one otherwise you people can screenshot that. Mara sir, display the question.
सब क्या थिएन के सर?
Okay. It is remember, you don't have to even copy now. अहिले बुझ्ने प्रयास गर्नुस्, copy गर्न सकिन्छ. Otherwise you can later on start the YouTube channel of CEDEP Nepal. Your video त्यहाँ recorded भएर बसिरहन्छ. No worries for that as well. So okay, next question is a pure content based question. I don't have to relate much my slides चाहिँ तपाईलाई एउटा architecture मात्र दिन्छु यो question को चाहिँ. You see the question there. What is the question number 4? What are the basic objectives of South-South cooperation? Describe the challenges facing South-South cooperation in the present world. It's a direct question. You don't have to worry for such type of questions there. So you see there, South-South cooperation is a new phenomenon in the world of global community. Remember that South-South cooperation is a term historically used by policymakers, especially to describe the exchange of resources, technology, knowledge between developing countries, also known as the countries of the Global South. Global South means what? Especially the nations having vulnerable economy, least developed status, and poor index of humanity, having severe corruption, political instability, extremely suffered from different fatal diseases. So in such nation, to enhance socio-economic status, socio-economic development, a framework was developed which is known as South-South cooperation. Simply you can understand that. अब यो क्वेशनमा तपाईं एकदम सिम्पल छ. You see here, पहिला के गर्ने? Introductory. 2 bullets. Definition. South to South cooperation. South-South cooperation को 2 bullet definition दिनुस्. Okay, South-South cooperation 2 bullet. Then after hook-up sentence ल्याउनुस्. Hook-up sentence. Directive sentence. Then after objectives. Or you can write proposals. Okay, objectives. Point मा लेख्ने यिनीहरुलाई चाहिँ. In points, you see the objective in points. Now, and then after, write significance of such cooperation. Significance of such cooperation in the modern world. And finally give a conclusion. So this is the framework for this question. You see there, 2 bullets definition of South-South cooperation, hook-up sentence, objectives, proposals in points, and then after significance of such cooperation in the modern world. You just have to write in this way.
सर
You see that?
सर यो अब्जेक्टिभ र सिग्निफिकेन्स उस्तै उस्तै कुरो होइन र सर हुनलाई त्यो जेको लागि हुनु हो त्यसै
यहाँ पोइन्टमा लेख्नु भएको छ यही कुरालाई स्ट्र्याटेजिकली अहिले मोडर्न कन्सेप्टमा किन महत्त्वपूर्ण छ यो अब्जेक्टिभ भने त साउथ साउथ फ्रेमवर्क स्ट्याब्लिस हुँदाखेरि किन स्ट्याब्लिस भयो भनेर लेखेको छ अहिले वर्तमान परिप्रेक्ष्यमा वाइ इट इज मोर सिग्निफिकेन्ट त्यो कुरा दिने हो तपाईले बट समहाउ इट इज बेस्ड अन दिस पोइन्ट्स यी पोइन्टमा बेस गर्छ Okay. Oh, sorry. Describe the challenges. Describe the challenges facing. Yes, not significant. Challenges are. Challenges are. Question mark challenges are. Please make correction. Challenges there. So challenges of such cooperation. Okay. Now you see the challenges are in Iraq. Okay, problems. Okay. So you see that commonly South-South cooperation is a broad framework for collaboration among. हुकअप सेन्टेन्स त यहाँ लेख्नु परिहाल्छ नि प्रत्येक चोटि मैले भन्नै पर्दैन त्यो त डाइरेक्टली चाहिँ लेख्छु साउथ साउथ कोअपरेसन इज अ ब्रोड फ्रेमवर्क or framework for what collaboration among whom least developed countries or countries of the south भने हामीले के बुझ्ने नर्थ भनेपछि डेभलप कन्ट्री भन्ने है एन्ड साउथ भनेपछि के भन्ने डेभलपिङ कन्ट्रीज भन्ने र So and then after you see there of the in the political, economic, political, economic, social, cultural, environmental as well as other technical domains. In field cooperation maintain गर्नका लागि अविकसित अथवा विकासशील राष्ट्रहरूको बीचको फ्रेमवर्क हो यो. So that technical cooperation can be taken place or can be forwarded to share as well as to cooperate for the mutual development among those countries because the cooperation between south and north countries through the historical time point of view has not brought significant changes in the status and situation of the least developed countries or the developing countries. That's why to obtain the robust development specifically in the political, economic, social, cultural, environmental, or other technical domains. A framework was under a framework or the okay. So a framework was developed to maintain bilateral, regional, sub-regional, or inter-regional basis for sharing the knowledge, expertise, resources, okay, as well as their development goals so that another nation also can develop and enhance the aptitude in a similar way. त्यही तरिकाले विकास गर्नलाई साउथ-साउथ कोअपरेसनको डेभलप भएको हो. And remember, South-South cooperation is managed by the developing countries themselves. There is no another coordinating body there. So, यसरी बुझ्नुहोस् यो साउथ साउथ कोअपरेसन भनेर किन उदायो भन्दाखेरि जब राष्ट्रिय टिममा खेलाडीहरू परेनन् भनेपछि बुझ्नुहोस् है अलिकति कमजोर खेलाडीहरू परेनन् अनि उनीहरूले आफ्नै अलायन्स बनाएर एउटा छुट्टै फुटबल टिम बनाए भनेपछि त्यसलाई हामीले के भन्छौं साउथ साउथ कोअपरेसन. ओके.
सर यो साउथ नर्थ कोअपरेसन त्यसको चाहिँ वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री यताउति त्यस्तो कस्तो छ सर साउथ नर्थ कोअपरेसनको त्यति सक्सेसफुल हुन नसकेको कारणले यिनीहरू इमर्ज भएको हो.
साउथ नर्थ कोअपरेसनबाट चाहिँ के भयो भन्दाखेरि डेभलप कन्ट्रीजहरूले मात्र बेनिफिट लियो. जस्तै अमेरिकाले जति पनि राष्ट्रसँग सम्बन्ध राख्यो ती राष्ट्रका रिसोर्स सकायो त्यो राष्ट्रको ह्युमन पावरलाई लियो र आफैलाई सक्षम बनायो. अलिअलि सहयोग त गर्यो but still they were not confirmed to have a profound assistance, aid, or commercial benefit from those nations. That's why, in the backdrop of not obtaining ultimate benefit from the relationship between developed and developing country, or from the developed and least developed country, the developing countries, they realize the need of developing the alliance with the similar members, with the nation or the states having the similar standard in economy, resources, politics, as well as other domains. That's why they agreed upon to establish this alliance to exchange the ideas, techniques, as well as the development strategies among themselves with the cooperative and collaborative form, so that the development activities can be achieved in the ultimate way as well as can be promoted the socio-economic situation. भनेको मेनली किन इस्टाब्लिश भएको थियो त भन्दाखेरि fostering the self reliance of developing countries, आफै सक्षम बनाउने क्या आत्मनिर्भर बनाउने यसको लक्ष्य हो. Promoting and strengthening the collective reliance, एकअर्काको चाहिँ म्युचुअल निडमा सहयोग गर्ने. Strengthening the capacity of developing countries to identify and analyze their main development issues. के हुन्छ उनीहरुका विकासका चाहिँ प्रतिरोधा के भन्छ चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि विकासका प्रगतिका बाधकहरु के हुन्छ त्यसलाई आइडेन्टिफाई गरेर क्यापासिटी बिल्डिङ गर्ने. And increasing the quantity and enhance the quality of international development cooperation. International development cooperation enhance गर्ने. त्यसै creating and strengthening the direct linkage between the developing countries. Increasing and improving the communication between those countries to share the knowledge and experience. To recognize and respond the problems and requirements, and to enable developing countries to achieve greater degree of participation in international community, especially in the economic activity, especially in the trade and economy there. यिनीहरु चाहिँ के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि यिनीहरुका तर च्यालेन्ज के भयो भन्दाखेरि all the nations are below standard. That's why they have got acute shortage of human power development and technological efficiency. उनीहरुसँग आफैसँग technological efficiency छैन, human power development छैन. Second is there is no strong one-on-one cooperation. किन geographical distance ले cooperation र collaboration लाई अलि बाधा बनाएको छ. Third thing is there, especially the alliance with the developed countries, strong linkage with the developed countries has also made it difficult. जस्तो अमेरिकासँग इजरायल यति strong linkage मा छ कि उले चाहिँ अरु डेभलपिङ कन्ट्रीजहरुसँग अथवा त्यो डेभलपिङ कन्ट्रीजहरुसँग उसले कोअपरेसन नै गर्दैन. यो कोअपरेसनमा बसे पनि आफ्नो इन्फर्मेसनहरु शेयर गर्दैन. See, there are several other problems there. Similarly, you see the economic financial de-integration को समस्या छ. इसीलिए horizontal partnership को एजेन्डाहरु डेफिनेट छैन मोडर्न कम्युनिटीमा. Similarly, counter-led capacity development प्लानहरु छैन. त्यो अर्को मोडर्न चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि पर्सपेक्टिभमा च्यालेन्ज हो. Similarly, the technological transfer as well as economic assets are not easily shared. It has got a problem. जस्तो चाहिँ यो free trade, economic cooperation गर्नका लागि they are not from the similar zone. So regional र सब regional geographical चाहिँ distance ले पनि उनीहरुलाई च्यालेन्ज मेन्टेन गरेको छ. And present conflict त्यस्तै गएर चाहिँ यो चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दा terrorism, they are also the strong issues there. Alienation to the powerhouse सँगको साँठगाँठ यसले पनि समस्या बनाएको छ अहिलेको प्रेजेन्टमा. यस्तै च्यालेन्जेसहरु लेख्दिनुस् पुग्छ. अब अर्को क्वेशनमा जाउँ. नेक्स्ट, what is the contribution of Nepal in terms of concept, growth and importance of regionalism? ल Number 5 को structure दिन्छु सबभन्दा पहिला. What is the contribution of Nepal in terms of concept, growth and importance of regionalism? Explaining brief answer. पहिला what is regionalism? अब यो डाइरेक्ट कन्टेन्ट क्वेशन हो. म यो क्वेशनलाई चाहिँ डाइरेक्ट भनिदिन्छु सर र भनिदिन्छु मात्र. What is regionalism? First thing. Second thing is there, concept means what? Why was it formed? Regionalism किन फर्म भयो? है विभिन्न रिजनल अर्गनाइजेसनहरु किन एक्जिस्टेन्समा आए? रिजनल फोरमहरु किन एक्जिस्टेन्समा आए? Now, growth. That means what? Significance. Growth किन भयो त? Significance त्यो महत्व के त? You see that another point is the importance, significance, growth and significance. And I mentioned this. And then after the role of Nepal in regional integration. Role of Nepal in regional integration and regional forum. Regional integration or regional forum. You see there. अन्त आफ्टर कन्क्लुजन तानिदिनुहोस्। यति कुरा हो, केही छैन नयाँ कुरा। सरलाई हिन्ट दिन्छु, त्यही अनुसार कन्टेन्ट हेर्ने बुकबाट। त्यो त डाइरेक्ट बुकमा भेटिने गरिदिनु, नट अ बिग डिल देयर। व्हाट इज रिजनलिजम फर्स्ट अफ अल? Regionalism is the expression of a common sense of identity and purpose combined with the creation and implementation of institutions that express a particular identity and shape with the collective action. That is to say, regionalism often expresses the collective uniformity to secure the specific zone or region through the collective efforts, maintaining mutual coexistence, respect for sovereignty, and free and flexible economic activities, as well as transit and transportation management. That is to say, you got to understand that regionalism is both socio-political entity. It defines the sense of combining the recognized states within a forum to develop common, to deal with common issues and interests of those nations there. And it can be derived as the development of regionalism was backdropped in the World War situation, while the least developed and the poor military situation having nations were threatened by the powerful nations of the world during the World War. The regional as well as sub-regional nations, they realized the importance of cooperation to secure them with the collective means. In that procedure, several regional organizations were formed in the world by looking the potential and capacity to uphold regional peace, stability, similarly, and important reservoirs of ideas, trade, connectivity, similarly, services, as well as technology. यी फिल्डहरुमा चाहिँ कोअपरेसन गर्नका लागि चाहिँ र एउटा सामूहिक सुरक्षा कायम गर्न विश्वका विभिन्न रिजनहरुमा सिमिलर जियोग्राफी, सिमिलर पोलिटिकल स्ट्याटस, सिमिलर डेभलपमेन्ट स्ट्याटस र सिमिलर इकोनोमिक स्ट्याटस शेयर गर्ने राष्ट्रहरुले एउटा कमन फोरमको रूपमा आफूलाई के गरे, डेभलप गरे। केका लागि त भन्दाखेरि
excuse me sir.
Okay.
Sir, I want to ask a question. So, Warsaw Pact and NATO are also the example of regionalism, or how can we call this?
Okay, NATO is not a regional organization. NATO is a strategical military organization which is defined with the pact of the nation. It is a military pact which has been formed to strike as well as secure the security situation of the powerful states, especially by United States and United Kingdom. NATO is not a regional force, but a military pact. Okay, so that is to say, you got to understand that regionalism often enhances the collective cooperation as well as collective collaboration for the mutual development of what? Mutual development of technical domains, technical areas, as well as to enhance the uphold regional peace, stability, security, as well as important reservoirs of ideas so that they can be shared with the mutual development of the region there. That's why regionalism was developed there. So why was it formed? Especially regionalism was developed to maintain common security, mutual security, this cooperation, collaboration, this protection from the external interference by collective security regional growth regional organ develop. So growth significance it enhances the mutual respect among the nations for protecting each other's security within the principle of what? Non-alignment and Panchashil. Panchashil र असंलग्नताको नीतिको बेसमा रहेर यी राष्ट्रहरूलाई एक अर्काको सम्प्रभुता र एक अर्काको स्वतन्त्रता रक्षा गर्ने र रेस्पेक्ट गर्ने एउटा कल्चरको डेभलपमेन्ट भयो। Similarly, development of socio-economic development and cooperation, समग्र सामाजिक आर्थिक विकास र चाहिँ another socio-economic development र technology है प्रविधि मैत्री विकासका लागि कोअपरेसन डेभलपमेन्ट गर्यो another is there ग्लोबल इस्युजहरूलाई ह्यान्डल गर्न सहज भयो किन एउटा राष्ट्रले त सक्दैन रिजनल इस्युजहरूलाई ह्यान्डल जस्तो टेररिजमका इस्युजहरू क्लाइमेटका एनर्जी क्राइसिसका सिमिलरली द pandemic diseaseहरू यिनीहरूलाई कोप अप गर्न पनि रिजनलिजमले somehow it helps. Just we can take the example of the function of BIMSTEC, SAARC, ASEAN, EU, Arab leagues. They have been profound, they have been significant in maintaining and securing the proposed full initiation and implementing the functional approaches to secure the fundamental needs of people of that region. That's why somehow these regional organizations have been significant in expanding the trade linkage, transit routes, transportation routes, as well as enhancing the collective security in that region. त्यसपछि आयो role of Nepal in regional integration. अब लेखिदिनुस् नेपाल as a founding दुई चारवटा regional example राखिदिनुस् जस्तो चाहिँ सातको फाउन्डिङ मेम्बर र सातलाई जहिले पनि चाहिँ एक्टिभेट गर्नु र रिजनल सेक्युरिटी र डेभलपमेन्टको लागि एडभोकेट गर्नु नेपालको एउटा रोल हो त्यसै नेपाल जतिवटा मेम्बर रिजनल अर्गनाइजेसनको मेम्बर छ यो यसको मेम्बर छ त्यो पनि नेपालको रोल हो र नेपाल ओपन एडभोकेट्स फर रिजनल पीस prosperity as well as advocates for pacific settlement of disputes in those forums. त्यो पनि नेपालको एउटा रिजनलिजमको के हो त स्ट्रङ अपहोल्ड बिलिफ्स एन्ड एक्सन हो त्यसलाई पनि लेखिदिनुस् त्यसपछि चाहिँ pacific settlement of disputes by using the diplomatic means either by track 1 diplomacy or by track 2 diplomacy. So यो कुराहरु खोल्दिनुस् नेपालको रोल आइहाल्छ त्यसपछि चाहिँ कन्क्लुजन तान्दिनुस् न बिग डिल देयर. अब जाउँ नेक्स्ट क्वेशनमा. That is question number 6.
Sir, excuse me, sir. The question is mainly concerned about the contribution, and I think a little bit more description should be given about the contribution there.
Contribution of Nepal. That is what I am telling. त्यही त भने त मैले contribution भने के फर्स्ट के भने चाहिँ कन्सेप्चुअल इन्सिडेन्टहरु देखाउने क्या कन्सेप्चुअल इन्सिडेन्टहरु प्रुफ गर्ने हो नि त कन्ट्रिब्युसन भनेको चाहिँ. Just for example, if you are asked what are the contributions of United States in Nepal भनेपछि के लेख्नुहुन्छ तपाई? What are the contribution of India in Nepal भनेपछि के लेख्नुहुन्छ तपाई? पु महेन्द्र हाइवे बनाइदियो, अब चाहिँ हुलाकी मार्ग बनाइदियो, त्यही लेख्ने हैन हो. त्यही हो कन्ट्रिब्युसन भन्ने बित्तिकै त्यसरी बुझ्नुपर्छ. रिजनलिजमलाई चाहिँ अझ यसलाई चाहिँ के गर्ने रिजनलिजमलाई स्पेशली टु मेक इट सिग्निफिकेन्ट. फर्स्ट स्टेप वाज दैट पहिलो स्टेप नै रिजनलिजमको के थियो भन्दाखेरि नेपालबाट सार्कको इस्टाब्लिशमेन्ट हुनु. एज अ फाउन्डिङ मेम्बर नेपाल एडभोकेटेड फर रिजनल फोरम टु कोअर्डिनेट फर कलेक्टिभ सेक्युरिटी एन्ड डेभलपमेन्ट. त्यस्तै चाहिँ to cope up with the regional issues जुन चाहिँ क्षेत्रीय समस्या भेगीय समस्या भन्छौं जसलाई हामीले जस्तो क्लाइमेट चेन्जका अवसरहरुका कुराहरु आउँछन् यसमा. त्यस्तै काउन्टर टेररिजमका कुराहरु आउँछन्. त्यस्तै चाहिँ ह्युमन पावर डेभलपमेन्टका कुराहरु आउँछन्. त्यसमा पनि नेपालले कोअर्डिनेट गरिरहेछ. अब अरु भन्दाखेरि जस्तो तपाईले अरु इन्सिडेन्ट के देखाउने मतलब बुझिहाल्नुहुन्छ भनेर पो सबै नभने हो त. You people have been undergoing through these issues. Nepal has been the host member of the कतिवटा सार्क समिटहरु होस्ट गर्यो त्यो लेख्नुस्. कतिवटा बिमस्टेक सम्मेलनहरु होस्ट गर्यो त्यो लेख्नुस्. कतिवटा चाहिँ के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि डिसआर्मामेन्ट चाहिँ प्यासिफिकेसन चाहिँ वर्कसपहरु कन्डक्ट गर्यो त्यो लेख्नुस्. त्यो कुरा लेख्ने हो नि त रिजनलिजमको कन्डक्टमा चाहिँ. ओके कन्ट्रिब्युसन भनेकै तिनीहरु नै हुन्. अनि नेपालको एडभोकेसीको बारेमा लेख्नुस्. नेपालको चाहिँ महासन्धिहरु साइन गरेको बारेमा लेख्नुस्. त्यही कुराहरु हुन्. ओके नेक्स्ट वान. नेक्स्ट क्वेशन देयर. ओके नम्बर 6 नाउ.
सर महासन्धिलाई के भन्छ उसमा इंग्लिशमा? ट्रिटी भनेको सन्धि भयो, महासन्धि भनेको
रेजोल्युसन. ओके नाउ यु सी देयर युएन रेजोल्युसन भनेर पढ्नुहुन्न जीकेमा त्यही त हो त महासन्धि भने. Okay, next question is there. Number 6. Okay, question number 6. Economic diplomacy should begin at home, not abroad. Do you agree with the statement? Elucidate your argument. It's very simple. Frame of frame of number 6. Go. First What is economic diplomacy? Next, just a two bullet, दुईवटा बुलेटमा लेख्नुस् यसलाई. Next, strategic significance. Strategic significance. Strategic significance, one bullet. Then after, you hookup sentence ma lekdina अब बुझिसक्नुभयो कुरा डाइरेक्टिभ सेन्टेन्स हो. Strategic significance. Next, economic diplomacy as state economic policy, as state economic policy, as economic interest of the state. Okay. Economic diplomacy as state economic interest. Next. Strategic diplomatic use for economic development of the nation. Economic development of the nation. Next, strategic diplomatic use for economic development of the nation. So, भनेपछि के बुझ्नु पर्यो त? Economic diplomacy. Economic diplomacy. छोटो interpretation गर्दै जाने as domestic policy to be executed in the global community. In the global community. Global community. अब प्रुफ भइसक्यो. अब जस्ट चाहिँ के गर्ने कन्क्लुजन लेख्दिने. यति कुरा लेखेको थियो प्रुफ भइसक्यो. It's very simple there. What is big deal there? Nothing is big deal there. Okay. So you see that it's very simple. Let me define and start. What is economic diplomacy? अब यो मैले define गरेर तपाईं बुझ्ने भएन. So, but still, economic diplomacy is the overall formulation of policies and strategic use of those is to fulfill the economic interest of the nation. She is adopted as a prime foreign policy in the foreign policy of adopted as a foreign policy to obtain the overall economic interest. And yes, definitely. So they start from what? Economic diplomacy. So that is to say, you got to understand that economic diplomacy is often described as overall process of formulation, implementation, and execution of state policy to uphold as well as to obtain the overall economic interest of the nation. Economic diplomacy deals with the management of free flow of goods, capital, and labor services in the global community through which a nation obtains its vested economic interest to upgrade its economic development. So that is to say, economic diplomacy should not start from abroad. Why? Economic diplomacy is a strategic art or intelligence of an individual state who fulfills its problem. That is to say, let me define in short, economic diplomacy. Why it is executed? Nepalको कन्टेक्स्टमा जानुस्. Exemplify गर्दिने नेपालको जस्तो. Economic diplomacy has been taken as a state policy to be executed with the economic development procedures there. Somebody is telling, what? Is boost up class happening? Oh, like that. मेरो क्लास बुस्ट अप जस्तै हुन्छ feedback class पनि, don't worry that. So that is to say, what else you got to understand that it's very clear that economic diplomacy has to be started. पहिलो कुरा एउटा कुनै पनि राष्ट्रको recognize मान्यता प्राप्त राष्ट्रले चाहिँ adopt गर्ने policy हो economic diplomacy, because it is formed by the individual state. कहाँबाट सुरु भयो? Domestic एरियाबाट. It is exercised by the trained professionals as career diplomats. कहाँबाट सुरु भयो? Domestic एरियाबाटै. Similarly, it is practiced to obtain the economic need and interest of the nation. कहाँबाट सुरु भयो? Domestic एरियाबाटै. Similarly, economic diplomacy prioritize the specific areas of economic development, demarcating them as the strategic point. जस्तो नेपालले पाँचवटा क्षेत्र घोषणा गरेको छ. के? First, foreign employment, foreign aid, foreign trade, foreign direct investment, hydropower development, tourism promotion. यहाँबाट कसरी चाहिँ strategically apply गर्ने? अब त्यसपछि global community मा जान्छ. You see the actor को MOFA, how it is acting, assisting role कसले play गर्छ? And कसरी technological support ideas and influence in the domestic government. How attracting foreign aid, assistance, loan and soft loan facilities to enhance the economic development of the nation. Economic diplomacy is the frontline diplomatic perspectives in the modern practices of diplomatic immunity or diplomatic community. That is to say,
economic diplomacy भनेको career diplomats को within range को work मा पर्छ कि ambassador कै range मा पर्छ सर? economic diplomacy को aspect भनेको चाहिँ
career diplomat भनेको छ ambassador को under मा काम गर्ने कार्य के भन्छ अफिसियलहरु हैन नि त. Ambassador is the chief of the mission and career officials work under him. So that is to say, rationally he works as a bridge to connect two governments in bilateral perspectives, as well as enhancing dignity, pride and prestige of the nation in the global community, with the strategic application of his intelligence to fulfill the economic interest of the nation. अनि सबै कुरा एउटै हो नि
सर. नेपालको इकोनोमिक डिप्लोमेसी भित्र मोबिलाइजेसन अफ एनआरएन पनि पर्छ कि कस्तो छ सर?
पर्छ. त्यो त स्ट्र्याटेजिक सबभन्दा महत्त्वपूर्ण रोल हो. उनीहरुको रोललाई एनहान्स गर्न त ड्युअल सिटिजनशिपको व्यवस्थासम्म संविधान संशोधन गरेर नेपाल सरकारले दियो. यसरी नम्बर 7 नाउ. पछाडीको क्वेशनहरु धेरै स्ट्र्याटेजिक छैन.
Sir, economic blockade might have some economic interest too, sir. Economic blockade too might have some economic interest, sir.
What?
Economic blockade too might have some economic interest of our state, sir.
Your sound is not so clear.
Sir, economic blockade भनेको कसै कुनै country को economic interest को कुरा हुन सक्छ र भनेर सोध्नु भएको छ उहाँले.
पुरै कटेर आइराछ है. अहिले एकछिनमा भन्नुस् है. Number
economic blockade might have some economic interest. Economic blockade को पनि economic interest हुन सक्छ नि हैन सर भन्न खोजेको मैले.
Definitely, why not? That is a strategic weapon. त्यसलाई भन्छ non-violent punishment. But remember that economic blockade is associated with political will or the strategy of the nation to impose upon vested interest. भारतले नेपालमाथि border blockade गर्नुको अर्थ उसको त्यो political interest थियो. That is to say, तर नर्थ कोरिया अथवा कुनै एउटा चाइना माथि अहिले अमेरिकाले गर्ने इकोनोमिक ब्लकेड अथवा ट्रेड वार भनेको इकोनोमी सँग मात्र इकोनोमिक इन्ट्रेस्ट सँग रिलेट गर्छ. तर भारतले गर्ने इन्ट्रेस्ट चाहिँ सो इट डिपेन्ड्स अपन द सिचुएसन इन व्हिच फन्डामेन्टल्स बोर्डर ब्लकेड हैज बीन कज्ड. इट इज न एउटा कुरा बुझ्नुस्, डिप्लोमेसी इज नट इमोरल. दैट्स व्हाई इन व्हाट पर्सपेक्टिभ डिप्लोमेटिक strategies are used by the individual state, that is definite according to geopolitical situation or the individual current situation of the state.
So economic diplomacy is also
foreign affairs to protect and promote interests of Nepalese workers abroad. What can be done to further improve it? Very content based question. यसलाई पनि म धेरै लामो जान्दिन. Okay, so फेरि यो feedback class नै 5 घण्टाको हुन्छ, धेरै लामो गयो भने. You see here now, give a realistic assessment of role of Ministry of Foreign Affairs to protect and promote the interest of the Nepalese workers abroad. So that is to say, first number 1, you see that institutional institutional objective introduction. मार्करले देखेन सर?
न ठीक छ सर।
ओके म अलिकति फिल गरिहाल्छु।
सरकोमा इन्टरनेट प्रब्लम भएर त्यही दोहोरो टु वे कम्युनिकेसन गर्न अलिक गाह्रो भएको हो साथीहरूलाई?
जस्ट अ मिनट, लेट मी फिक्स। त्यो पनि हुन सक्छ, मेरोमै रहेछ सर ब्रोडब्यान्ड प्रब्लम। एकैछिन है त।
ओके हाम्रो सृजनजीहरू जोडिनु भएको हो?
हजुर सर।
भेरी गुड, जोडिनु भएको छ। तपाईँ बिचमा हराउनु भयो क्या तपाईँ? हो
बिचमा आफ्नै सेल्फ प्रिपरेसन भइरहेको थियो सर।
या भेरी गुड। अनि हाम्रो विक्रम भाइ जोडिनु भएको छ नि? विक्रमजी,
विक्रम सर चाहिँ हुनुहुन्न जस्तो लागिरहेको छ, पार्टिसिपेन्ट्समा हुनुहुन्न होला सायद अहिले।
ए हुन्न, कसरी छुटायो? अनि पहिलाको हाम्रो टिमहरू कहाँ गयो? पहिलाको हाम्रो तयारी गर्ने साथीहरू?
मैले पनि खोजिरहेको छु, फेरि नयाँ एकाउन्ट बनाएर खोजिरहेको छु, भेटिरहेको छैन साथीहरूलाई।
तपाईँ त्यो ग्रुपमा हुन सक्नुहुन्न?
म छैन सर, मैले खोज्ने कोसिस गरिरहेको छु। म फेरि अब उहाँहरूलाई यता बोलाउँछु नि।
मलाई मेसेज पाउनुहोस्, त्यहाँ सबैलाई एक्टिभ गर्नुहोस् ल। यो पढ्न छोड चाहिँ अलिअलि एक्टिभ
गर्नुहोस्। Is it working better everyone?
हजुर
यस सर, ठीक छ सर।
Is it working now?
ठीक छ सर। यस।
Okay, so let's continue. It has already been late, okay, everyone. So you see
सर
this.
एउटा कुरा क्लियर हुन खोजेको सर। इकोनोमिक कोअपरेसन मात्रै इकोनोमिक डिप्लोमेसी भन्न मिलेन?
No, it's not like that. Economic diplomacy does not only defines the economic cooperation, but it is the strategic use of diplomatic means and art through which a nation fulfills its precisely economic interest. Economic, why? In the conventional practice, if you count diplomacy in the traditional point of view, it was conventional. That is to say, it was targeted to protect the state's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. But the modern state, with the rising globalization, are in the strong chain of interconnected economic relation. That is to say, no nation can stand alone. No nation can survive in isolation. That's why with the trade, transit, similarly, employment, aid, similarly, FDI, MNCs, each and every states are interlinked with the strong chain of globalization. That's why the modern state, they do not practice conventional old or closed diplomacy there. And in the modern state, we practice open diplomacy, citizen diplomacy. We practice, that is to say, economic diplomacy at present. So primarily, economic diplomacy deals with the economic need and interests of the nation.
सर यो सिटिजन डिप्लोमेसी भने के हो? इकोनोमिक डिप्लोमेसी कै एउटा पार्ट हो कि?
एक कुरा यसरी ल्याउनु भयो भने त म सक्दै सक्दिनँ, दुईटा क्वेशन पनि सक्दिनँ। अर्को फिडब्याकमा बरु के हो सिटिजन डिप्लोमेसी सर्ट नोटमा राखेर एक्सप्लेन गर्दिनँ।
हुन्छ सर, आश सर।
ल, institutional objective introduction. You see here, what is this? Institutional objective introduction चाहियो क्या मोफाको? Introduction of MOFA. भनेपछि यहाँ तीनटा कुरा आयो हेर्नुस् त। यो what is MOFA आयो, किन इस्टाब्लिश हुन्छ मोफाको रोल आयो, अनि बल्ल यो दुईटा कुरालाई समाहित गरेर इन्ट्रोडक्सन आयो। मैले लेख्नु पर्दैन मोफा के हो, तपाईले पढिरहनु भएको छ। जसले पढ्नु भएको छैन, क्लास इनरोल भइरहनु भएको छ तपाईहरु, I will explain in the depth regarding all that issues, but still let me tell you in short. त्यही पनि म सर्टमा भन्दिन्छु तपाईहरुलाई चाहिँ अहिले चाहिँ right? Because everything cannot be explained in the feedback class. Feedback class, you receive the strategy for dealing with the question and the major points to include. Pura class को जस्तो यहाँ 2-3 जना साथीहरु मलाई थाहा छ उहाँहरु मेरो क्लासकै स्टुडेन्ट हो है तपाईले क्लासको जस्तो गरेर क्वेशन सोधिरहनु भएको छ किन भन्दा तपाईहरु चाहिँ यु आर बिगिनर इन डिप्लोमेसी आन्सर त्यो भएर तपाईलाई क्वेशन धेरै आका हो तर अलिकति तपाईले पढ्ने ह्याबिट चाहिँ गर्नै पर्छ यु सी दैट So Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the embassies, permanent mission and consulates that refer abroad are entrusted with the several responsibilities. This is the place of first contact in exercising the diplomacy. Our MOFA is Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the line ministry dealing with the foreign policy or has got a strength, has got a specific role to enterprise the foreign policy of the state as well as execute the foreign policy to maintain bilateral relations to withstand in the global community. That is to say, you can understand that MOFA is a key node in diplomatic communication system through which we maintain or gather the information as well as enhance global relations. It is a policy advice forum. It is a policy advice forum through by providing the expertise to politicians or the administrators. It settles or it targets or it maintains or executes the foreign policy of the state. So it has got several functions that it has got a, it is a prime diplomatic channel to maintain the diplomatic communication between the recognized states or within the friendly relations. Or it is a policy advice function in which it provides the corrective feedback to formulate the new policy regarding the foreign policy issues and foreign affairs. Besides, it has got a function to coordinate with coordinate as well as administrate the missions abroad and collect the information as well as play important creative role to execute the foreign policy to fulfill the national goals and interest abroad there. So एकदम सिम्पल छ सेकेन्ड क्वेशनले यहाँ सेकेन्ड पार्टमा के भनेको छ भन्दाखेरि यसको यो क्वेशन डाइरेक्ट क्वेशन छ त्यसकारणले तपाईले चाहिँ त्यति धेरै टेन्सन लिनुपर्ने कुरै छैन यो अब के भनेको छ एसेसमेन्ट भनेपछि तपाईले यसको चाहिँ मेजर एसेसमेन्ट भन्ने बित्तिकै पहिला के ल्याउने मेजर फंक्शन्स एन्ड अब्जेक्टिभ्स फंक्शन एन्ड अब्जेक्टिभ्स एउटैमा मिलाइदिए पनि भयो एउटै कुरा हो त्यसपछि आउँछ significance in what? Foreign policy execution, significance in bilateral relations, significance in global community. Then another is there, contextualize. Contextualization of MOFA Nepal. MOFA Nepal like contextualize गर्नुस् है MOFA Nepal like contextualize गरिदिनुस् यो भनेको एकदम सर्ट सेन्टेन्समा आउने कुरा हो धन्नै अगाडिका दुईटा प्याराग्राफमा सबैले ल्याइसक्नुपर्छ किन हाम्रो यहाँ मेजर इश्यूज भनेको नेपालको मोफाले चाहिँ एब्रोडको वर्करहरूलाई कसरी सेभ गर्छ भन्ने कुरा छ अब त्यसपछि जानुस् चाहिँ हाउ इट प्रोटेक्ट्स मैले त्यो क्वेशनको इश्यूलाई यति मात्र लेखेर छोड्दिएँ यही कुरा लेख्दिनु अब म 4-5 वटा पोइन्ट भन्छु त्यही पोइन्टको कुराहरूलाई चाहिँ रिलेट गरेर ब्रोडेन गर्ने पहिलो कुरा फरेन इम्प्लोयमेन्टलाई के गर्ने चाहिँ फर्मुलेट गर्ने फरेन इम्प्लोयमेन्टको लागि पोलिसी फर्मुलेट गर्ने पोलिसी एक्जिक्युट गर्ने र म्यानेजमेन्ट गर्ने काम कहाँ एब्रोडमा कसले गर्छ मोफाले भने के त विभिन्न राष्ट्रहरुसँग लेबर कन्ट्र्याक्ट गर्ने त्यस्तै गएर चाहिँ ती राष्ट्रहरु चाहिँ सँग चाहिँ वर्क परमिट चाहिँ पोलिसी अथवा वर्क परमिट एग्रीमेन्टहरु साइन गर्ने त्यसपछि गएर चाहिँ त्यहाँ चाहिँ नेपाली वर्करहरुको स्टे र चाहिँ रेम्युनरेसन भन्छ है स्टे एन्ड रेम्युनरेसन सम्बन्धी चाहिँ उनीहरुको त्यहाँ बसाई र तलब सम्बन्धी कुराहरुमा कोअर्डिनेट गर्दिने एउटा काम भयो है दोस्रो काम हेर्नुस् है सेकेन्ड इम्पोर्टेन्ट काम भने के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि प्रोटेक्सन अफ सिटिजन भनेको मोफाको त्यहाँको डिपार्टमेन्ट अथवा मिसनहरुको इम्पोर्टेन्ट रोल भन्छ हामीले प्रोटेक्सन अफ सिभिलियन्स अफ होम कन्ट्री भनेपछि त्यहाँ भएका नेपाललाई जुनसुकै समस्या पर्दा पनि मोफा एसिस्ट गर्छ भन्नुको अर्थ एम्बेसीजहरु कन्सुलेटहरुले चाहिँ एसिस्ट गर्छ सिमिलरली अनदर इज द इमर्जेन्सी असिस्टेन्स जस्तो अस्ति कोभिड-19 को बेलामा के भयो त त्यहाँका वर्करहरू र कामदारहरू नेपाल फर्काउनु पर्यो नि, कसले गर्छ त एसिस्ट? मोफा भनेको यसरी बुझ्नुहोस्, मोफा इज अ रेस्पोन्सिबल अर्गान टु इनिसिएट द क्रिएटिभ रोल टु प्रोटेक्ट द सिभिलियन्स एब्रोड। एब्रोडको सिभिलियनहरूलाई चाहिँ प्रोटेक्सन गर्न चाहिँ यसैको रोल हुन्छ। इमर्जेन्सी एसिस्टेन्ट, अनदर इज द लिगल एसिस्टेन्ट। कतिपय कामदारहरू के हुन्छ, भिजाको म्याच सकिएको इलिगल चाहिँ काम गरिरहेको हो, उनीहरूलाई चाहिँ केस र ट्रायल पर्दाखेरि त्यहाँको लोकल कोर्टमा कसले लिगल एसिस्टेन्ट प्रोभाइड गर्छ? मोफाले। सो तपाईहरुले फेरि मोफा भनेपछि त्यहाँको एम्बेसीलाई छुट्टै बुझ्नुहुन्छ होइन, मोफा भन्ने बित्तिकै सबै हो। एम्बेसी, मिसन, कन्सुलेट, डिपार्टमेन्ट सबै कुरा आउँछ है। त्यस्तै अर्को कुरा, यदि कोहीलाई चाहिँ मृत्युदण्डको सजाय तोकिसकेको छ भने ब्लड मनीको व्यवस्था गर्ने गरी नेपाल सरकारसँग एसिस्ट गर्ने, त्यो काम पनि के हो त? मोफाकै काम हो। त्यस्तै अर्को भनेको
सर के मनी भन्नुभयो? ब्लड मनी अरे?
ब्लड मनी। त्यो ब्लड मनी भनेको के हो भन्दाखेरि जस्तो कसैलाई मृत्युदण्डको सजाय तोकिसकेको छ, त्यो त्यहाँका चाहिँ त्यो ट्रायल गर्ने कोर्टमा अथवा त्यो मुद्दा हाल्ने व्यक्तिका परिवार अथवा त्यो भिक्टिमको परिवारलाई चाहिँ अब मान्छे त मरिसक्यो, उसँग चाहिँ गभर्नमेन्टले मेडिएट रोल प्ले गरेर, एम्बेसीले त्यहाँको गभर्नमेन्टसँग मेडिएट एउटा आर्बिट्रेरी रोल प्ले गरेर उसको फ्यामिलीलाई कन्भिन्स गरेर मुद्दा फिर्ता लगाउने र सर्टेन अमाउन्ट अफ पैसा उसको परिवारलाई दिने, त्यसलाई भन्छ ब्लड मनी। कस्ट अफ ब्लड, उ त मर्न लागेको मान्छेलाई पैसा तिरेर फर्कायो नि, त्यही भएर ब्लड मनी भने हो। यी कुराहरूलाई रिलेट गरिदिनुहोस्, पुग्छ यो क्वेसनमा। ल नेक्स्ट, अनि त्यस पछाडि चाहिँ अरू कुरा के भयो? यिनीहरूको भिजाको, पासपोर्टको सबै डकुमेन्ट एटेस्टेसनको काम पनि कसले गर्यो? एब्रोडका चाहिँ एब्रोडमा रहेको चाहिँ कामदारहरूको काम पनि मोफाले नै गर्यो, छैन त्यो। सो अल दिस फ्याक्ट्स आर। अनि उनीहरूको त्यहाँ सेक्युरिटी, त्यस पछाडि गएर चाहिँ हेल्थ सेक्युरिटी, इकोनोमिक सेक्युरिटी, त्यो विषयमा पनि एडभोकेसी गर्ने र त्यहाँको गभर्नमेन्टसँग कोअर्डिनेट गर्ने काम कसले गर्छ? मोफाले नै गर्छ। त्यति कुरा खोलिदिनुहोस्, पुग्यो। ल नम्बर 8 नाउ, लास्ट पार्ट है त। नम्बर 8, it is said that Treaty of Peace and Friendship between Nepal and India 1950 is an unequal and outmoded treaty. Give a rationale. अब यो त एकदम सोध्न सक्ने क्वेसन हो, एकदम ध्यान दिएर तपाईले यो क्वेसन पढ्नु होला। अलि इन्टरप्रिटेसन पनि चाहिन्छ, म अलि सर्टमा गरिदिन्छु बिकज वी आर अलरेडी लेट फर आवर फिडब्याक सेसन है। पहिलो कुरा के हो त यो पिस एन्ड 1950 ट्रिटी भनेको? द गभर्नमेन्ट अफ इन्डिया एन्ड द गभर्नमेन्ट अफ नेपाल recognizing the ancient ties which have happily existed between the two countries, desiring still further to strengthen and develop these ties, have signed this peace and friendship treaty in 1950. But why it is unfair? चार पाँचवटा पोइन्ट माइन्डमा कहिले पनि एड गर्ने, ट्रिगर गरे। पहिलो पोइन्टमै यो ट्रिटी अनफेयर छ। नेपालका तर्फबाट मोहन सर शमशेर श्रीतिन महाराज भने, भारतको तर्फबाट चन्द्रेश्वर मिश्रा कि के भन्ने चाहिँ उतापट्टिको एम्बेसडर चन्द्रेश्वर नारायण सिंह होला, मिश्रा होइन, चन्द्रेश्वर नारायण सिंह भनेपछि एउटा राजा र राजदूत भने जो सहसचिव लेभलको कर्मचारी हो भनेर बुझ्नुहोस्। उनीहरूको बीचमा साइन भयो ट्रिटी। ट्रिटी जहिले पनि समान तह, स्पेशली हेड अफ द स्टेट अथवा हेड अफ द गभर्नमेन्टको बीचमा साइन हुन्छ भन्न खोजेको। त्यही नेपाललाई अन्डर एस्टिमेट गरिसक्यो, that is unfair. पहिलो स्टेटमा नै unfair भयो। Second thing is there, somehow the treaty of peace and friendship 1950 has threatened the state sovereignty of Nepal. नेपालको state sovereignty र चाहिँ state integrity लाई somehow यसका प्रोभिजनहरूले नेपालको सार्वभौम सत्तालाई थ्रेटन क्रिएट गरेका छन्। कसरी त? भारतमा चाहिने हात हतियार ल्याउन इन्डियालाई सोधेर इन्डियाको बाटो भएर ल्याउनु पर्छ भनेर आर्टिकल 5 ले एक्सप्लेन गरेका छ। भन्नुको अर्थ के त? त्यो 10 वटा आर्टिकल सब घोकेर राख्नुपर्छ है। यहाँबाट क्वेसन 100% सोध्छ। यसपालि इपीजी को रिपोर्टलाई सम्म इन्क्लुड गरेर सोध्छ। अर्को नेक्स्ट फिडब्याकमा अलिकति बढी इपीजी को क्वेसनलाई यहाँ अलिकति मात्र रिलेट गरेका छ, इपीजी को क्वेसनलाई अझ बढी बेल्ट गरेर एउटा क्वेसन बनाइदिन्छु। So that is to say, you understand that some provisions of the treaty are against the principle of sovereign equality and some others are either controversial or have not been into force. That's why it is unfair. कतिपय आर्टिकलहरु अहिले पनि त्यो एक्जिस्टेन्समा आकै छैन, फंक्सन नै गरेको छैन। कतिपय आर्टिकलले नेपालको स्टेट सोभरेनिटीलाई च्यालेन्ज गरेको छ भनेपछि यो अनफेयर हो। And Nepal India Treaty of Peace and Friendship 1950 is in fact a bedrock for a special relation, but still it has created unfair relationship between Nepal and India. So it is a fundamental accord on whose basis other treaties, agreements, and especially other agreements have been signed by through. That is to say, यसरी बुझ्नुहोस् एउटा फन्डामेन्टल एग्रिमेन्ट थियो नेपाल इन्डिया रिलेसनलाई एउटा नयाँ उचाइमा लिने। तर यसका आर्टिकल क्लजहरू एउटा कुरा बुझ्नुहोस् 1950 ट्रिटी साइन भइसकेपछि अहिलेसम्म नेपालसँग एउटा ओरिजिनल डकुमेन्ट छैन। साइन गरेपछि ट्रिटी साइन गर्दाखेरि एकअर्काले चाहिँ एक्सचेन्ज अफ लेटर गर्छ नि त, त्यहाँ छैन नेपालसँग प्रति एउटा फोटोकपी छ त्यो पनि धेरै पछि भारतले उपलब्ध गरायो। कुनै पनि दुईवटा राष्ट्रको बीचमा ट्रिटी साइन भइसकेपछि इमिडिएटली त्यो ट्रिटी कन्क्लुजनमा आउन भन्छ। कन्क्लुजन अफ ट्रिटी भनेको ट्रिटी राटिफिकेसनमा आउने प्रोसेस हो। त्यो कन्क्लुजन अफ ट्रिटीको लास्ट पार्ट भनेको युएनमा रेकर्ड हुनु हो एज अ युएन मेम्बरसिप। युएनमा त कति पछि रेकर्ड भयो त्यो गयो। ल हेर्नुहोस् त्यो स्टेपले पनि यो अनफेयर भयो। सिमिलरली यो पीस एन्ड फ्रेन्डशिप ट्रिटी इज अनफेयर बिकज नेपालको संविधानले वर्जित गरेको कुरा त्यो ट्रिटीमा लेखेको छ। नेपालको संविधानले कसैलाई पनि ल्यान्ड ओनरशिपको अधिकार दिने र यहाँ चाहिँ जग्गा खरिद गरेर पर्मानेन्टली बस्न दिने नेपालको संविधानले भनेको छैन, तर त्यो ट्रिटीले भनेको छ। भनेपछि त्यो अनफेयर भयो नि। ट्रिटी भनेको कहिले पनि अगेन्स्ट द ल अफ द एक्जिस्टिङ स्टेट जानु हुँदैन एन्ड म्युचुअली एग्रिड अपन हुनुपर्छ। अनफेयर त सिधै यस्तो भयो कि नेपालले त्यो बेलादेखि अनफेयर भयो भनेर एडभोकेट गरिरहेछ। इन्डियाले रिभ्यू गर्नै चाहँदैन, रिप्लेस पनि गर्न चाहँदैन। रिप्लेस यतिकै छ हो। यी मेजर पोइन्टहरूलाई तपाईँले होल्ड गरेर चाहिँ यसलाई इन्टरप्रिटेसनमा लेख्ने हो, एनालाइसिस।
एक्सक्युज मी सर, सर यो इपिजीसँग त्यो रिलेटेड जुन क्वेसन छ त्यो इपिजी क्वेसन चाहिँ अलि आउटडेट भइसकेको छ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई हैन। त्यो इपिजी क्वेसनले चाहिँ अब आउँदाखेरि
मैले एक्सप्लेन नगर्न खोजे है,
किन भन्दाखेरि फाइनल रिपोर्ट त बनाइसकेको छ हैन। अब आउनु पर्यो भने कसरी क्वेसन आउँला सर इपिजीसँग, इपिजीलाई लिएर?
इपिजीलाई लिएर भन्दा हैन, अब यो चाहिँ एउटा कलेक्टिभ, यो चाहिँ कलेक्टिभ बार्गेनिङको क्वेसन आउँछ क्या। बुझ्नुभयो कलेक्टिभ बार्गेनिङ भनेको के हो? सबै बोर्डर डिस्प्युटदेखि लिएर नेपाल इन्डिया रिलेसनलाई कम्पोजिट नयाँ प्रोटोकल बन्ने गरेर के गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने टाइपको क्वेसन आउँछ क्या। अब कमन इस्युलाई सोध्दैन, बरु लिपुवाद्वारा लिपु लेखलाई बेस गरेर बोर्डर इस्यु क्वेसन एकदम स्योर सोध्ने सम्भावना छ। त्यही भएर आज त्यो क्वेसन राखेको थिएँ है त। सो डिफाइन द रेकग्निसन अफ रेकग्निसन विदिन द रियल्म अफ, यति त सजिलो क्वेसन त मैले एक्सप्लेन गर्नै पर्दैन होला, डाइरेक्ट क्वेसन छ। व्हाट इज द रेकग्निसन अफ द रेकग्निसन त मैले डिफाइन गर्नै पर्दैन। स्टिल यदि डिफाइन गर्नुपर्छ भने पनि गरिदिन्छु, इट्स नट अ बिग डिल। रेकग्निसन इज अ प्रोसेस अफ अटेनिङ absolute sovereignty and ultimate independence by the global community. Recognition is a process of obtaining ownership as well as absolute power within its own people and subject. भन्न खोजेको कुनै एउटा नयाँ राज्यले रेकग्निसन पायो भन्नुको अर्थ उसले आफ्नो बाउन्ड्री लाइन भित्र सबै कुरा गर्न पाउँछ, सबै एकदम कोर्सिभ पावर एक्जिक्युट गर्न पाउँछ भन्नु हो। रिमेम्बर दैट obtaining, अब यो obtaining यो अगाडिको what is recognition सिम्पल भयो, पछाडिको इम्प्याक्टको कुरा गरौँ। के हुन्छ त इम्प्याक्ट? जब एउटा रेकग्नाइज स्टेट हुन्छ, फर्स्ट इट क्यान एक्सरसाइज एब्सोल्युट पावर विदिन इट्स सब्जेक्ट, आफ्नो सब्जेक्ट माथि एब्सोल्युट अनलिमिटेड पावर एक्जिक्युट गर्न पाउँछ। फर्स्ट थिङ। सेकेन्ड थिङ इज देयर इट क्यान प्र्याक्टिस बाइलेटरल एन्ड इन्टरनेसनल रिलेसन्स। इट बिकम्स द सब्जेक्ट अफ इन्टरनेसनल ल। त्यो देशको कानुन, संविधान र त्यसले गरेका सन्धि सम्झौताहरू पनि इन्टरनेसनल ल का सब्जेक्ट बन्छन्। सिमिलरली when a nation obtains the recognition, then the acts of the state are recorded in globally record हुन्छन् अथवा international recognition पाउँछन् ती एक्टहरूले चाहिँ। Another fact is there, when a nation is recognized, it obtains complete or absolute sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity of the state. राज्यको सम्पूर्ण चाहिँ सम्प्रभुता, स्वतन्त्रता र राष्ट्रिय अखण्डता इन्डिभिजिबल वेमा पनि प्राप्त गर्छ। त्यो पनि के हो त भन्दाखेरि recognition. Once recognition is obtained, that recognition is never taken back. फिर्ता लिन मिल्दैन recognition. That is another impact. अनि it can receive aid, assistance, grant, as well as loan from global community. Another, it can sign a treaty agreement, accord, pact, or any other agreement with the state. It can establish diplomatic mission abroad. एब्रोडमा डिप्लोमेटिक मिसन इस्टाब्लिस गर्न सक्छ. Similarly, it can exercise bilateral relations in the perspective of friendly as well as strategic point of view. हुन्छ यी कुराहरू चाहिँ इम्प्याक्टमा लेखिदिनुहोस्. अब यो राइट सर्ट नोट त मैले एक्सप्लेन गर्नु पर्दैन होला सर र भनिदिन्छु. 8 मेमोयर is a less formal अथवा informal note which is circulated among the delegate members to memorize or to make them aware that should not be forgotten during the bilateral meetings or diplomatic dealings. कुनै पनि दुई राष्ट्रको चाहिँ डेलिगेसन मेम्बरहरू अथवा डिप्लोमेटिक मिटिङ हुँदाखेरि कुनै राष्ट्रिय महत्त्वका विषयहरू नछुटुन् भनेर चाहिँ पोइन्ट आउट गरेर आफ्ना डेलिगेट मेम्बरहरूमा मात्र सर्कुलेट गरेको इन्फर्मल डकुमेन्ट हो. 8 member, but it is a proposed agreement. But it is not formal. It is not taken into the process of signatory. It is less formal. It is circulated only among the self-delegated members. That's why it is often considered as the collection or the summary of the agenda that are to be discussed in the diplomatic dealings. अर्को छ ambassador designate, proposed ambassador हो, उसँग डिप्लोमेटिक इम्युनिटी र प्रिभिलेज हुँदैन. ambassador designate भनेको नेपाल सरकारले नोमिनेट गरेको चाहिँ संसदबाट चाहिँ सुनवाई भएर नेपाल सरकारले चाहिँ लेटर अफ क्रेडेन्स दिइसकेको तर लेटर उले फुल्ली एक्रेडिटेड नभइसकेको त्यो राष्ट्रले रिसिभिङ स्टेटले के भन्छ भन्दाखेरि लेटर अफ क्रेडेन्स एक्रेडिटेसन प्रोसेस नगरिसकेको मेम्बर हो. He cannot exercise the diplomatic immunities and privileges. He is not considered official representative of the state until and unless he is accredited by the head of the state of that particular government. He is ambassador designate. यसको अपोजिट हुन्छ ambassador चाहिँ के भन्छ हो युवराज कतिवटा is के भन्छ ambassador designate right now because he has not obtained diplomatic recognition and diplomatic accreditation yet. युवराज कतिवटा अहिले proposed ambassador हो, ambassador designate हो. अब जसले diplomatic accreditation पाइसक्छ he is the ambassador at large, and ambassador at large is called ambassador the extraordinary plenipotentiary within the perspective of Vienna Convention 1961 on diplomatic relations. Next is the good offices. Good offices is the track to diplomacy. Track to diplomacy is what is the work of arbitration. Mediation को काम गर्ने दुईवटा belligerent र disputable parties-हरुलाई pacific settlement को means-बाट conflict settle गर्नलाई apply गरिने कुनै एउटा recognized state अथवा non-state actor organization-ले गर्ने behavior good offices हो. Simply you can say that good offices are for the world peace. They are to settle the dispute and conflict by practicing the persuasion as well as convince to the disputable parties to bring them into the process of peace. अर्को छ agreement. Agreement भनेको के बुझ्नुपर्छ? Agreement is a procedure. Agreement is the official approval or the official sanction granted by the receiving state for the appointment of an ambassador. एउटा कुरा बुझ्नुस्, अहिले नेपाल सरकारले युवराज कतिवटाको लागि के पठाएको के मागेको छ अमेरिकाको सरकारसँग agreement मागेको छ, approval. Though the appointment of an ambassador is the rightful authority and decision of the sending state, but to accept the mutual coexistence and respect the diplomatic protocol, each and every state they seek as well as proceed the agreement to obtain official approval that those nations have no problem in maintaining or in accepting the proposed ambassador as the official representative or chief of diplomatic mission in the host country or receiving country.
ambassador अहिले appoint भयो भने सरकार चेन्ज भयो भने ambassador चेन्ज हुन्छ कि हुँदैन? ambassador अहिले appoint भएको सरकार चेन्ज भयो भने ambassador चेन्ज हुन्छन् कि हुँदैनन् कि आफ्नो टेन्युर अनुसार काम हुन्छ उनीहरुको पनि?
लेटर अफ रिकल हुन्छ. लेटर अफ रिकल हुन्छ यदि त्यो पोलिटिकल कन्सेप्ट हो भने. अहिले त अलि कम हुने गरेको छ, तपाईलाई थाहा छैन होला कति समय यस्ता कुराहरुलाई तपाईहरुले चाहिँ अन्डरमाइन गर्नु भएको थियो. अलि पहिला के हुन्थ्यो कांग्रेसको सरकारमा चाहिँ कांग्रेसका चाहिँ कार्यकर्ताहरु अथवा आफ्ना नजिकका मान्छेलाई राजदूत बनाएर पठाउँथे. एमालेको सरकार आउने बित्तिकै त्यसलाई चाहिँ फिर्ता बोलाउने आफ्ना राजदूत. त्यो भनेको चाहिँ गभर्नमेन्ट डिसिजन हो. बिकज द गभर्नमेन्ट मैले अघि नै भने नि एउटा रेकग्नाइज गभर्नमेन्टसँग एब्सोल्युट पावर हुन्छ र उसले कुनै पनि डिसिजन लिन सक्छ आफ्नो इस्युको बारेमा. सो बेसिकली हुनु नपर्यो, त्यही भएर नेपालका यो हामीले मोफाको ड्रब्याकहरुमा नेपालको फरेन पोलिसी किन एक्जिक्युट हुन सकेको छैन भन्ने कुरामा पढ्छौं. सो यु have to understand that these diplomatic perspectives are the soulful authoritative decisions of the sending state, but still the agreement is the official approval granted by the receiving state. जस्तो पम्फा भूषाललाई चाहिँ प्रचण्ड गभर्नमेन्टले चाहिँ राजदूत बनाएर चाहिँ नोमिनेट गर्दाखेरि पम्फा भूषाललाई फ्रान्स सरकारले एग्रीमेन्ट दिएन. भन्नुको अर्थ there are few in such type of incidents and examples that agreement is not provided due to the political will and the political linkage of those nations. But still it is unusual that agreement is not provided by the state. यो अलिकति unusual नै चाहिँ लाग्छ डिप्लोमेटिक कम्युनिटीमा चाहिँ जब हामीले चाहिँ जब कुनै राष्ट्रले एग्रीमेन्ट दिदैन भने. And last is their persona non grata, unaccepted person, the person who has been declared not accepted or unwanted. That is to say, declaring persona non grata is the severe and most scathing process or behavior in diplomatic practice, which can lead towards the termination of diplomatic missions as well as can bring two nations in the state of contentious belligerency. युद्धात्मक अवस्थामा पनि ल्याइदिन सक्छ. कुनै पनि राजदूतलाई चाहिँ देश छाड्न उर्दी जारी गर्नु भनेको त्यो राष्ट्रको बेइज्जत गर्नु हो र त्यो राष्ट्रमाथि चाहिँ त्यो राष्ट्रको छविमाथि चाहिँ त्यो राष्ट्रले धावा बोल्नु हो. त्यसकारणले डिप्लोमेटिक मिसन त्यो दौत्य सम्बन्ध नै अन्त्य हुन सक्छ. जस्तो लास्ट टाइम चाहिँ साउदी अरेबियाले इरानको राजदूतलाई देश निकाला गरेको थियो. जब इन्डिया र पाकिस्तानको जम्मू कश्मीर डिबेट भयो त्यति बेला पनि चाहिँ एक अर्काका देशले चाहिँ मिसनलाई नै चाहिँ इन्ड गरेर चाहिँ पर्सना नन ग्रेटा घोषणा गर्ने सम्मको चाहिँ स्थिति पुगेको थियो र प्र्याक्टिस भएका थिए. सो पर्सना नन ग्रेटा घोषणा कति बेला हुन्छ भन्दा 4-5 वटा सिचुएसनमा. एक, जो यदि एम्बेसडरलाई मात्र गर्छ अथवा चीफ अफ डिप्लोमेटिक मिसन उसले स्पाईको काम गर्यो त्यहाँ गएर चाहिँ है स्पाईको काम गर्यो. स्पाई भने त बुझ्नुहुन्छ तपाईहरु हैन? के हो स्पाई भनेको?
उनीहरुको कुनै इन्टेलिजेन्स जासुसी उनीहरुको चाहिँ
जासुसी गर्यो. त्यहाँको इन्टरनल सेक्युरिटी सिस्टम, इन्टरनल एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिभ पोलिटिकल सिस्टमको जासुसी गर्यो, निकाल्दिन्छ देश. त्यसै चाहिँ त्यहाँको देश विद्यमान देश र कानुनलाई च्यालेन्ज हुने गरेर उनीहरुले चाहिँ कुनै फंक्सनहरु गर्छ, निकाल्दिन्छ. क्रिमिनल ललाई चाहिँ च्यालेन्ज दिने एक्सनहरु गर्छ, देश निकाला गरिदिन्छ. त्यस्तै दुई राष्ट्रहरु चाहिँ युद्धात्मक अवस्थामा पुगे, देश निकाला गरिदिन्छ. So you have to understand that declaring persona non grata is the must severe and study. And now, so अब तपाईहरुको जति पनि क्वेशन छन् क्लासमा डिल गर्छु म है.
सर एउटा सानो क्वेशन है
सर, यो जोइन्ट कम्युनिकेको भोल्युम चाहिँ कति जति हुनु पर्छ सर एक्जाममा?
2.5
जोइन्ट कम्युनिकेको
यो के चाहिँ राइट सर्ट नोटको
जोइन्ट
कम्युनिकेको भोल्युम कति हुनु पर्छ भन्दाखेरि कम्तिमा 2 पेज हुनु पर्छ. तपाईलाई क्लासमा सिकाइहाल्छु नि म जति लेन्थ चाहिने हो. Okay, now is CEDEP. Okay, now listen to me everyone. And we have come to an end of today's live session here. So if you do have questions, please certainly you can ask. Otherwise, we will end the today's live session. Ali questionहरु गर्दाखेरि छोटोमा आन्सर आउने खालको गर्दिनु होला because we have already spent.
सर यो एक्सप्लेनिङ द फलोइङ छ नि सर, यो कति 5 वटा आउने हो कि 2टा आउने हो सर? कसरी आउँछ यो एक्सप्लेनिङहरु 10 नम्बरको?
5 वटा. त्यही भएर मैले क्लासमा तपाईलाई जति लेखाइदिएको छु त्यति लेखे पुग्छ. कहिले 4 वटा सोध्छ, कहिले 5 वटा. 5 वटा सोध्यो भने 2 मार्क्सको, 4 वटा सोध्यो भने 2.5 को 4 वटा सोध्छ. सो एक प्याराग्राफको भोल्युम भन्नु पर्छ. मैले बोर्डमा तपाईलाई जति जुनको लेखाइदिएको छु त्यति लेख्नुस्, काहीँ खोज्नु पर्दैन, अरु केही लेख्नु पर्दैन, सकियो ल.
सर यो अनि यो मोफाको चाहिँ क्वेशन सेट हैन, मोडेल सेट चाहिँ अलि रिपिटेड आइराछ, अलि पुरानो क्वेशनहरु पनि दोहोरिएको जस्तो लागिराछ सर हैन? यसमा अलि
यो तपाईलाई एजुकेट गर्नलाई हो है. यो एउटा कुरा बुझ्नुस्, क्वेशन्स आर फ्रिक्वेन्टली रिपिटेड बट विथ द डिफरेंट ल्याङ्ग्वेज. भाषा परिवर्तन भएर तपाईले के बुझ्नुस् भन्दाखेरि यो धेरैजना साथीहरू जो पहिलो पटक जाँच दिनुहुन्छ म भएको उहाँहरूलाई लाग्छ कि अहिले नै अर्मेनिया र अल्जेरियाको क्वेसन आइहाल्छ। नट लाइक द्याट। कन्टेन्ट त्यही हो, कुरा बुझ्नुहोस् नि। तपाईँले 60 देखि 65 सालदेखि यताको क्वेसन हेर्नुभयो भने नयाँ क्वेसन जम्मा एउटा आउँछ। त्यो नयाँ क्वेसनले करेन्ट ग्लोबल इस्युज अथवा नेपालसँग सम्बद्ध इस्युलाई डिल गरेको हुन्छ। सक्यो। बाँकी सबै कन्भेन्सनल क्वेसन हो है। आज नरेश सरले यसो भन्नुभयो भन्ने सोच्नु होला, भोलि जाँचमा आएको दिन थाहा लागिहाल्छ तपाईँहरूलाई है। किन भन्दाखेरि डेमार्केटेड कन्टेन्ट भित्र क्वेसन सोध्छ। र नेक्स्ट फिडब्याकमा तपाईँलाई म्याक्सिमम ग्लोबल इस्युज र करेन्ट अफेयर्सलाई डिल गर्ने क्वेसनहरू म तपाईँहरूलाई राख्दिन्छु। ल, टिल देन we have come to an end of today's live session, all of you, and I'm really thankful that for your interactive and enthusiastic participation in today's live feedback. And I cannot remain off without thanking much, thanking in billions, I say, to Madhav sir for creating such a wonderful opportunity, even during the time of this COVID-19 pandemic, to facilitate you at least for certain knowledge and technical areas for cooperating as well as assisting you for attaining your goal. And I'm really thankful for your enthusiastic participation. At last, I would like to wish you happy Dashain, and this Dashain will bring colors in your life, and stay happy, stay safe. Thank you very much. I bid goodbye. Namaste to all.
Thank you, sir. Good night, sir.
Good night.
Good night, sir. Thank you so much. Happy Dashain.
Bye-bye.
थ्याङ्क यू सबैजना, थ्याङ्क यू भेरी मच, थ्याङ्क यू नरेश सर, थ्याङ्क यू भेरी मच। र यसै गरिकन सबै साथीहरूलाई पनि धन्यवाद। र अब अन्तिममा र यो दसैँभन्दा अगाडिको हाम्रो अन्तिम इक्जाम हो, यो पराष्ट्र सेवाको अन्तिम इक्जाम हो। पराष्ट्र सेवा सम्बन्धी जुन हामीले एक च्याप्टर 1 एन्ड एक च्याप्टर 2 को जुन इक्जाम गरेका थियौँ, त्यो इक्जाम सम्बन्धी अन्तिम इक्जाम हो। र ओके, अन्तिम इक्जाम हो र हामी र नियमित क्लासमा भोलि बेलुका 6 बजे हाम्रो क्लास हुने नै छ। र त्यस पछाडि अब हाम्रो अर्को इक्जाम भने यो दसैँ पछाडिको बिचमा मलाई लाग्छ 15 गते शनिबार पर्छ। त्यो शनिबार चाहिँ हाम्रो इक्जाम हुनेछ। दसैँ पछाडिको पहिलो इक्जाम कति दिएछ त्यो शनिबार हाम्रो फर्स्ट एक च्याप्टर 1 हैन, एक च्याप्टर 1 को इक्जाम हुनेछ। सबैले सो अनुसार तयारी गर्नु होला। यो जानकारी गराए र सम्पूर्ण हाम्रो जुममा जोडिनु भएका सबै विद्यार्थी सहभागीहरूलाई यसै गरिकन युट्युबमा अनि फेसबुक पेजमा हाम्रो लाइभ हेर्नुहुने सम्पूर्ण विद्यार्थीहरूलाई पनि एकदमै धन्यवाद र सबैलाई ह्यापी विजयादशमी। विजयादशमीको एकदमै शुभकामना छ सबैजनालाई। र एकदमै यो चाडपर्व एकदमै उल्लासमयका साथ मनाउनु पर्यो। तर उल्लासमय भनेको बाहिर हिँडेर होइन, घरमै बसेर मनमा उल्लासमय र एकदम खुसी भएर मनाउने। किनभने जस्तो परिस्थिति छ त्यसलाई एक्सेप्ट गर्न सक्नु हाम्रो एकदम महानता हुन्छ। त्यही कारणले परिस्थिति अनुसार चल्न सक्नुपर्छ, सोसियल डिस्टेन्स कायम गर्ने र सँगसँगै अलिक भड्किलो खालको सामाजिक उच्छृङ्खल टाइपको तरिकाले हामी कसैले पनि यो चाडपर्वलाई नमनाऊ। एकदमै भलात्मिक तरिकाले एकदमै यसलाई चाहिँ मनमा उत्साह बोकेर समयअनुसारको चाहिँ दसैँ चाडपर्वलाई मनाऊ र सबैलाई एकदम सुरक्षित स्वास्थ्यको कामना छ। आफ्नो स्वास्थ्यको विशेष ख्याल गर्नुहोस्, एकदमै जोगिएर बसौँ, यही जानकारी गराउँछु र यही सबैलाई अनुरोध गर्छु। र त्यो सँगसँगै तपाईँहरूको यो वर्षले चाहिँ कम्तीमा तपाईँहरू जुनमा लागिरहनु भएको छ यस्तो पेन्डेमिकको बेलामा पनि तपाईँहरू धेरै मेहनत गरेर लाग्नुभयो र सबैजनाको एकदम उज्जवल भविष्यको कामना छ। र सँगसँगै विजयादशमीको यो अवसरमा पनि तपाईँलाई यसैमा सबैलाई पूर्ण सफलताको एकदमै कामना गर्छु। र लोकसेवा आयोगमा यो वर्ष अब जुन तपाईँ पहिलो इक्जाम दिनुहुनेछ र त्यो पहिलो इक्जाममा तपाईँहरूले सफलता प्राप्त गर्न सक्नुहोस्। सरकारी सेवामा एज अ डिप्लोमेट्स तपाईँहरू परराष्ट्र सेवामा प्रवेश गर्न सक्नुहोस्, मेरो शुभकामना छ। र मेरो अफिस CEDEP नेपालको तर्फबाट र नेमको तर्फबाट तपाईँहरूलाई सबैलाई शुभकामना। थ्याङ्क यू अल।
थ्याङ्क यू सो मच।
थ्याङ्क यू अल, धन्यवाद सबैजनालाई। थ्याङ्क यू अल। हामी अब बेलुका क्लास भोलि बेलुका 6 बजे हुनेछ हाम्रो नियमित क्लास। र अरू सहभागीहरूलाई हामी इक्जाम मात्र दिनुहुने सहभागीहरूलाई नेक्स्ट विक हामी भेट्छौँ नि। थ्याङ्क यू अल, धन्यवाद।
थ्याङ्क यू सर।
हस्, वेलकम।